Okay, before I start the meeting, I'd like to report out from our special meeting that direction was given to staff. So with that, please let the record show that all council members are present, and please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any changes or additions, deletions to today's agenda?
Move for approval.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I don't see approval of minutes, so I'll move on to announcements and presentations. First of all, I have a proclamation recognizing Max Dunn's contributions. This is a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg recognizing the many contributions to the community by Max Dunn. Whereas as CEO of Alliance Medical Center, Max recognized the need for a larger facility and saw to it that a new building was constructed and opened, tremendously expanding Alliance's ability to provide the much needed health care to our community, thus positively affecting a great many lives in our community and the health of mothers, children, fathers, and older people. And whereas Max donated hours and hours to the Salvation Army as a counselor, Max taught anger management classes and set up transitional housing in Healdsburg for those who had graduated from the program and actively solicited jobs for those graduates, even going from business to business asking for jobs for them. And whereas Max was instrumental in the formation of the Healdsburg District Hospital's Pediatric Dental Initiative in 2001 to serve low-income children of Northern California, and he was its treasurer since its inception. And whereas Max was active in Healdsburg Rotary, acting as the club's secretary for over 20 years. And whereas Max worked with the City of Healdsburg to construct the Day Labor Center. And whereas Max enthusiastically supported universal causes such as Village Hope Corps, a micro-lending organization in Africa. And whereas Max did all these things for our community while living life with a smile on his face for everyone to see. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby recognizes Max Dunn's many contributions to the community and sincerely thanks him for helping provide care for so many in our community. Thanks, Max. Is there anyone here to receive the proclamation?
To accomplish for the benefit of others. And this is much appreciated and treasured by the local folks and the Dunn family. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I knew Max for quite a while, and he was very special to the community and a real inspiration to all of us. Moving on to item 2B, we have a proclamation for Falls Prevention Week. Is there someone here to receive this proclamation? Leah. Wonderful. This is a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring September 22nd to the 28th, 2017 as Falls Prevention Awareness Week. Whereas falls are the leading cause of injuries requiring hospitalization or treatment and injury-related deaths in California, and with the vast majority of these occurring among older individuals, and whereas falls are preventable when education, awareness, and intervention are put in place, and whereas naturally the ranked evidence-based A Matter of Balance program is sponsored by the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging with partner agencies and trained volunteers to raise seniors' confidence about their balance and increase their activity levels to reduce risk of falls. And whereas since A Matter of Balance began in Sonoma County, approximately 1,250 older adults have participated in classes throughout the county. 137 sessions have been provided to 19 volunteer coaches serving 154 seniors in fiscal year 16-17. Whereas by legislative resolution of 2008, California has established the first week of fall as Falls Prevention Awareness Week. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby declares the week of September 22nd to the 28th, 2017 as Falls Prevention Awareness Week in the City of Healdsburg.
Good evening, City Council members. I think many of you know me. I'm Leah Black. I am here representing the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging Advisory Council as a member. You might not know it, but every 11 seconds, a person, an older adult, falls and sustains an injury. Every 19 minutes, a person dies from those falls and related injuries. So the Matter of Balance class that the Sonoma County Area Agency on Aging sponsors is wonderful. We had it at the Senior Center many years ago. Here we have many balance classes, strength training, and yoga classes. So I encourage everyone to stay fit, exercise, and stay active so we don't become fall victims. Having just experienced this with a very close family member who we just brought home from the rehab, you don't want this to happen to your family member. It affects them, it affects the whole family. So be proactive, and I appreciate and thank you for being part of this national movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah, for your work in this area. Okay, moving on to item 2C. We have a proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring September of 2017 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas 1 in 7 fathers, sons, husbands, brothers, partners, and friends will be diagnosed with prostate cancer, and whereas it is estimated that 17,240 men in California alone this year will be diagnosed with prostate cancer, and whereas men with relatives, fathers, brothers, sons with a history of prostate cancer are twice as likely to develop the disease, and whereas veterans are 1.5 times more likely to get prostate cancer, and whereas firemen have a higher incidence of prostate cancer than the general population, and whereas prostate cancer is the #1 most commonly diagnosed cancer in American men and the #3 cause of cancer death behind lung and colon cancer, and whereas this year approximately 161,360 men will be diagnosed with prostate cancer in the United States alone every year. That's 1 man in every 3.3 minutes, and roughly 26,730 die this year from the disease, which is 1 man every 20 minutes. Whereas education regarding prostate cancer and early detection strategies are critical to saving lives and preserving and protecting our families. And whereas all men are at risk of prostate cancer, and when we encourage the citizens of Healdsburg to increase the importance of prostate cancer screenings. Now, therefore, let it be proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby declares September 2017 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Healdsburg. And,
Thank you, Sean, and City Council members for this extra effort in educating the public about prostate cancer awareness. Perhaps you saw the awards last night and all the blue ribbons that were there. And I was so pleased to see so many actors, actresses, and people in general wearing those blue ribbons. Well, it's very interesting. Just before coming here, we had a person over for dinner, and she says, "Yeah, I saw that, but what did that mean?" And that's what this is all about. That's what our efforts, that's what a fundraiser that the Living Well 60 Plus that I'm a part of is going to be doing October 28 at the Raven Theater. It's about raising awareness throughout the community. It's about raising some funds to get that education, costs of dollars to make it happen out there. And I look forward to next year, not only for the month of September, prostate cancer awareness, but that we can do here in Healdsburg a first for a city here in California, which would be landmark blue lighting, which means for an entire month, you have just a blue bulb even, but anything that has blue on it at night throughout the community, especially throughout the square and downtown, there's a blue that says prostate cancer awareness. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Virgil. Okay, next we move on to item number 3, council reports on matters of interest occurring since our regular meeting. Who'd like to kick that off? Councilmember Gold?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you about a meeting that I had at Recreation Park with Jaime Correa from the Public Community Services Department, and with Ron Dobley, who's a Park and Rec Commissioner, and with a couple of representatives of the Bulldogs baseball group. Basically, in recent years, the noise level from the games has gotten pretty extreme. I've been living near Rec Park for 24 years, so it's not a surprise to me that it generates noise, and usually it's kind of a nice noise. But in recent years, as I said, it's gotten to be a lot louder, so that you can basically hear every word very cleanly and crisply inside your home with all the doors and windows shut, which just seems excessive. Bulldog games especially are problematic because they start at like 9 a.m. on Sundays, and they go usually till after dark. So anyway, we met with the representatives of the Bulldogs. They were certainly aware of the problem and were very cooperative in trying to consider solutions. Apparently, there's just one speaker left, and that one speaker has to broadcast all the way across the field to the other stands. And it's a problem for them too, because people sitting near the speakers, it's really blasting them, and it's hard for people in the concession stand to hear. So I think there's technology solutions that we could come up with. For example, wireless speakers that are in the opposing stands and just, aimed at the correct volume for the people who are attending the game. And then the speakers could also be in the home stands, aimed at the correct volume and aimed towards the attendees and not broadcast across the neighborhood. So, anyway, I just wanted to make you aware of this, and I think he'll be looking for some estimates, and we'll try to figure out a funding source to upgrade the technology and make things a little better for the neighborhood.
Excellent.
Yeah, a couple of just casual things. I heard that the issue of possibly taxing vacant homes has become an issue in the Seattle mayoral race, with one of the mayoral candidates proposing that and making it an issue she's campaigning on. So it'll be interesting to watch and see how this idea is being perhaps spread in other parts of the country. And one other thing, I don't know if you noticed the film crew last week that was in town. They were from British television, and they were doing a feature on single thread. I was told it's going to be very big. So that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Higley?
Yeah, a couple things. As I mentioned at the last meeting, I was at the 20th Annual Western States Commercial Real Estate Finance Conference, which I've been going to for the past 17 years. And while I was there, I had a chance to meet with a couple of people that worked with FHA and HUD, HUD lenders, specifically focusing on the 221D4 loan programs, which helps with affordable housing. And so based on those conversations, hopefully within the next couple of months, I'll be having a meeting in San Francisco with some of the West Coast directors, as well as the colleagues that I work with and maybe city managers, to kind of see what are the obstacles that prevent us from being able to tap that resource a little bit better. And there might be some minor tweaks that can be done. So that's what I'm exploring on that. And then I attended last week the League of California Cities with Councilmember Neokas and City Manager. And one of the, it was actually, I think, the very first panel that I attended was, they mentioned it was kind of economic and redevelopment. And redevelopment obviously doesn't exist, but the conversation related around economic development. And they pointed out, cities tend to focus on what can you bring in new businesses. And part of the economic development conversation needs to be taking care of your existing businesses. And what the example they gave was, if every single one of your businesses could add one more job, you've basically done, you've helped your local businesses grow without having the additional expense of trying to get somebody new in. So it's kind of something that stuck with me. I continue to have conversations with citizens about the type of businesses they want to see in town, not just what they don't. So I've been reaching out when somebody says, I don't want this. Well, tell me what you want. I was in charge of leasing for 10 years, and that's all I did was leasing retail property. So tell me what you want, and let's see if there's resources that we can use to get those type of tenants in town. Also today I had my first official meeting as chairman of the finance committee for NCPA. And oh man, I was nervous, but I got through it without too many mistakes. And so that's kind of the end of my report. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Neokas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, along with the other council members, I think, with Councilmember Manzel for sure, met with Replay to discuss the mill project and get their latest updates on that. Sorry. Also, again, attended with the League of California Cities with Councilmember Hagley. I was the voting delegate, what that's worth. But it was really, as with all the league events, it was very interesting. Lots of useful sessions and contacts made, and most importantly, ideas that were shared around topics from homelessness to civic engagement to, the culture of innovation in the city government and self-driving cars. One of the quotes that stuck with me was something about civic engagement and the idea that the underserved are the uninvited. So if we really want to think about making sure that we are serving our constituents, we need to make sure we invite those constituents to the conversation. But one of the biggest, most exciting presentations, which I was like jumping out of my seat, oh my God, was with Lyft. Lyft and MTC, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, but Lyft in particular because they're very interested in engaging with municipalities to provide partly subsidized transportation services to all kinds of populations, including the seniors. So complete with an option for seniors to call cars without needing to use a smartphone, and then also first and last mile connectivity. To transportation like SMART. It was great. I walked from that session and walking to the Capitol steps for another event, who I'm walking next to, but Deb Fudge, who's the director of the SMART board. Deb, guess what I was just talking to Lyft about? So the value of those league sessions where we have those ideas and the people and the contacts and the conversations is it's exciting. So hopefully great things will come of that. And that's all what I have to say.
Cool. Vice Mayor Mansell.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I also had an opportunity to meet with the Mill District developer, David Hill, and it was really good for me because post-R, the plans have definitely changed, and it was a really good meeting. It was visual, which I need to be able to understand things. I need to see image, and I really appreciated that. They had a video, and then they moved on to talking about specifics with housing and how they're looking at their project. I really want to meet with developers and understand more where we're going with some of our projects. So I really am happy that they're reaching out to the community and specifically the electeds. On September 6th, I went to the Northern Sonoma County Air Pollution Control District, which is a new district. And as you probably know, Healdsburg's been housing this district for a while across from St. John's, and across from the Senior Center. And the whole topic that day, chaired by James Gore and Linda Hopkins is the co-chair, was about CAL FIRE and preventing fires and controlled fires. So that's always interesting. That was up in Cloverdale. And long meeting, but interesting meeting, learning a lot and understanding more about that. And of course, the geysers, just knowing our relationship with that from our NCPA relationship. September 11th, I was at the Sonoma County Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting, and we learned of some new funding that the state of California will be able to give to us from Senate Bill 1. There's some local road funding. I just emailed that, just latest information to our Director of Public Works and our city manager. It's pretty exciting to see money that is going to be allotted to Healdsburg. The way they formulate the giving of that money is population as well as vehicle registration, which I think is interesting, and then lay miles. So it kind of goes 50% of the money allocations are based on population, and then they go to the issue of vehicle registration, and then the last quarter is the lay miles. So that was interesting, and again, just kind of trying to see what kind of monies we could look forward to in the future with all these new taxes being imposed on the California residents. And the last thing I want to mention is what I think a lot of the energy in the room is based on tonight, which is the September 13th lunch, where I got to walk around Healdsburg. I bike around and walk around quite a bit, and my credit card statements will tell you as a middle-class woman that I spend a lot of money in downtown Healdsburg. I enjoy shopping in Healdsburg. And it was really nice to walk around on this Chamber of Commerce tour. I think it was probably a little bit HTID energy as well, but to walk with Carla Howell and to go over to see different places, specifically over to Bella and Extravagance and Cartograph Wines, and then ending at Cousteau's. I started at the Diaz property I didn't even know existed, except I'd been there for a fundraiser. But it's really nice to walk around and talk about business and talk about what it is to be in business and around the square. And I really enjoyed that conversation with everybody. And it was an open conversation about what's happening and how money is being spent. And it was brought up, and I want to share it, that the locals, that would be me, really do want to come downtown and be part of the vibrancy of all the shops. And we do come downtown. And I think that there's a whole issue there that we might do a better job of understanding that piece. At least I think it needs to be, discover downtown again or something, because I feel like there's a lot going on that's really amazing retail-wise, and it's wonderful to be with the shop owners. And I think that's pretty much it, Mayor, right now. Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I have was last Saturday, I was the guest of former council member Zedrick up at the museum's History Lives dinner up at the Villa, where the museum recognized Meredith and Jim Driesbach for their living history and their roots that go way back in the area. It was really nice to learn about where they came from and all their connections to our community. So that's all I have for that. So we'll move on to item 4, city manager reports, which we have
Nothing to report.
And so now we're on item 5, public comments on non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public of matters of general interest that are not on the agenda, but related to city council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the council cannot take any action or any discussion on these items during this comment period. Speakers are encouraged to limit their comments to 3 minutes so that everyone has a chance to speak. Members of the public wishing to speak on a consent calendar item should notify me at this time, and we can pull that for further discussion. So, welcome.
Well, I hope you can give me more than 3 minutes. I'll get some items that are pretty important, I think. I know they're very important. I guess everybody knows that of the looming, I want to say, a disaster of our roundabout. And my name is Cullen Wilder, Healdsburg class of 58, moved around with my career. I'm a civil engineer, still working as a civil engineer. Registered in 2 states, active, inactive in 3 others. I've probably done a couple of 100 projects that are as difficult and complicated as the one that you're faced with. I appeared before you once before, and I wrote a letter to you and also to the Tribune, and I recommended very strongly not to go ahead with those projects because I could see that I predicted that it would be a real disaster. I thought that it would be drawn out over many more time than what you had planned, and that would have an adverse effect on business. And I think that's pretty much been borne out. I also said in my letter, and also when I spoke to the council, that if they were hard over on the roundabout, that they could at least not go ahead with the improvements that are south of the roundabouts that go all the way to the freeway. In my mind, that would make that would minimize the disaster, I guess you would say. And I felt that those improvements are really just to the benefit of developers that would develop on the east side of that part of the road. They should be made to put those developments in. So I guess my hope is that you will minimize the disaster by eliminating that part of the work. I understand we're already a year past over the date that it was supposed to be done, or the projected date. I said at the time it would probably be 3 or 4 years, and I still stand by that if you go ahead with all of the work. And so I see that we have really all new faces here except for Mr. McCaffrey. And so I think nobody is invested in this project, and I think you could choose to go ahead and eliminate the south side of the south improvements. I think every contract will have the provisions that would allow you to do that. I think that you're probably heading into a much larger disaster. I mean, it's not going to be easy to deal with a contractor. I've been there and done that, and you don't just you can't just kick him off the job and tell him to go away, because you'll be in a world of hurt. So anyway, that's what I had to say, and I hope that you can at least consider my advice. I think that I was right, and I think that we can.
Thank you, Mr. Wilder.
Minimize those.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Anyone else with the? Vern, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Vern Losh, Healdsburg resident. I just want to let you and, of course, the public know about a great event that's happening this week over at the Best Western. The California State Firefighters Association is coming to town for a conference, their annual conference. Something of historical note, though, or maybe not historical but significant, is we have a live fire burn that's going on Tuesday and Wednesday, and we're going to dress up one of our local reporters. Maybe I think he's an editor of our local paper, Ray Hawley, and we're going to put him in an encapsulated suit with a breathing apparatus and stick him inside that burn trailer. And that's going to happen around 10:30 tomorrow. And if anybody wants to come by, there's plenty of room to watch. I just want to let you know about that. But we invite everybody to come by the conference. One of the things that's a visual thing that's there is right at the entrance to the Best Western, underneath the canopy, is an early 1900 steam pumper that has been, it actually started out in Reno, was purchased originally by the city of Reno, but it's completely restored. It's been on television. It's been on in about 7 or 8 rose parades. And it's really something nice to look at. But thank you, and everybody's welcome to come by.
Thanks, Vern. Alan, welcome.
I'll keep this really short. At the last meeting when we talked about parking, I heard 3 out of 5 of you express serious doubts about paid parking, and then we all voted for paid parking. So I would just ask all of you to stay true to that and really examine every option that you possibly have that keeps us free and open downtown. Thanks.
Thank you. Ariel, welcome.
Hi, my name is Ariel Kelly. I'm the board chair of Corazon Healdsburg. Wanted to share with you all that Corazon is going to be the Earn It, Keep It, Save It earned income tax credit site for Healdsburg. We're partnering with United Way of the Wine Country to do tax preparation for low-income families and individuals. And we're going to be having that site at the Healdsburg Community Center, and it will be starting in late January through late April during tax season. And we're seeking volunteers, both who'd be interested in doing tax preparation work, greeters, translators, office runners who want to help us do printing materials. But it's basically the United Way provides a very robust training program for a lot of different volunteers. People don't even have to have experience as accountants or in tax prep. You just have to be able to be willing to learn and be trained. And the training program is really fantastic. And so we're going to be housing that program through Corazon at the community center and are looking now for site coordinators and volunteers who will participate in that training in December and January. And it'll be one night a week, so it'll probably be on like a Tuesday or Wednesday night that will be open in the evenings at the community center. And we hope to do tax preparation for Healdsburg families, workers in Healdsburg. And we know that there's a huge need because last year in Windsor, the tax site there that did the same program at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church did half of the folks who went there were actually Healdsburg residents. So we know there's a huge need, and we're very excited to be the recipients of a over $3,000 grant from United Way to do the program here in Healdsburg. But then we're also looking to raise some funds locally to match part of that so we can provide some funding towards staff and people who are going to be doing the registration calls. And then for residents, if they call 211 and say that United Way does a ton of PR and outreach, and so 211 will actually be sending people to our site and scheduling them online. So a lot of the work that gets done will actually be 211 and United Way sending people our way. But the big push that we need to now do is get volunteers. So if you happen to know anyone who has spare time, retirees, semi-retired folks, please send them our way to Corazon, and they can email us or come to our office. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more public comment, I'll close the public comment and move on to the okay, one more commenter.
Mayor, Council, Tim Unger, Healdsburg. First, an update. This is with respect to parking study expenditures.
Tim, could you turn on the microphone, please?
I think it's on. The green light's on. That should be better. I'll just speak a little more closely to it. First, regarding parking study expenditures. After 2 requests and a clarification, I was given the data that I requested. And in summary, a total of $194,000 was spent on parking studies since 2008, 49K of which went to TJKM in 2008, and the balance, or 75% of that, went to Walker at $145K. So my single question is, what have we done? What's been born out of those studies to benefit the community in terms of improved parking? Many in the community don't see the positive that has come out of that $200,000 spend, and we're scratching our head. Separate to that, what have we spent on consultants overall in general since 2008? And where's the ROI on that spend? I don't believe that consultants are a bad thing. I just think too often they're used to insulate ourselves, to hide behind a decision, rather than make an informed decision based upon our own experience and what we've been elected to do. Are we going to be talking about the RFP for the compensation study as part of the consent calendar, or is that going to be part of the agenda? If not, I'd like to speak to that now.
We can discuss that item separately, yes.
So I can speak to this now?
No, well, you can come up later.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else with a comment on a non-agenda item? Okay, I will close the public comment and move on to the consent calendar. And we are going to pull item H. So at this point, I would like to, if there's a motion to approve the consent calendar without item H.
I move we approve the consent calendar with the exception of item H.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Gold,
Yes.
Councilmember Higley,
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mansell, Mayor McCaffrey.
Yes. Okay, so now we'll move on to item 6H, an agreement with Bryce Consulting for a classification and compensation study.
Good evening, Mayor McCaffrey and council members. Before you tonight is a resolution approving an agreement with Bryce Consulting for a classification and compensation study in the amount not to exceed $65,400, authorizing the city manager to execute said agreement and amending the fiscal year 17-18 budget, increasing appropriations by the amount. The city has not completed or implemented a comprehensive classification compensation study in excess of 20 years. As stated in the 2017-20 MOUs adopted by council to date, the city agreed to hire an independent professional to conduct a classification and compensation study, with Bryce Consulting being the recommended professional. The agreed upon completion date is January 1, 2019. Staff requested a proposal from Bryce, and that is what's before you tonight is the agreement with Bryce. That concludes staff's report.
Thank you, Assistant City Manager Ippoliti. Are there any questions from council?
Maybe, yes, if you could clarify what led you to decide on Bryce in particular, and to invite Bryce specifically to propose for this.
In years past, the city has done, to my knowledge, 2 other classification studies with different consultants. And it's good to get a different consultant because they look at things differently. And then also 2 of the 3 employee groups actually recommended Bryce Consulting, as well as our professional negotiator. He has worked with Bryce Consulting, and Bryce Consulting came very highly recommended. That was the impetus.
Right. What's the? I guess I'm you know what? That's fine. That's fine.
Just to follow up. So, as a person that went through bargaining this year for all the different bargaining units and trying to make sense out of how it works, because my experience is all education and it's really different in the city, and my eyes kept opening. I know that there was an issue about not knowing what certain jobs required, what tasks, and how to pay people based on their level of experience. And so I understood there would be a study of some kind to understand the classifications and to understand the 130 plus full-time employees that the city of Healdsburg now has under employment. So I guess it is curious about just what led us to this and $65,000. So I just want to make sure that I understand. So we just accepted this because we had 2 bargaining units that were comfortable with it, and we also accepted it because there was some familiarity with the company. That's pretty much why Bryce got it.
That is correct. And their experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I could just interject, I think it's very challenging to find a consultant that labor agrees with and a bargainer, if you will, agrees with. Typically, those folks don't necessarily see eye to eye. So if we can find somebody that both of them have an understanding for and a respect for, and the number seems reasonable from staff's perspective, that would be a positive.
So city manager, would that suggest then that we're going to be looking at different jobs and possibly looking at different ways to pay them? Or is it more or less just confirming what we currently do when we put people in a job title?
So a classification and compensation study studies the, it usually compares the classifications of the city of Healdsburg with classifications in other similarly situated agencies. That's the classification portion. The compensation section portion will compare our compensation to other similar agencies. And what the city manager said is absolutely correct. We will likely need to negotiate the impacts of this study. Any implementation will likely need to be negotiated with the bargaining units. So for us to get bargaining unit buy-in at the beginning before we do the study is, if we can get that, that's huge for us. We should absolutely take that.
So is it a money saver to do the $65,000 study so we can actually get a better understanding at the beginning of bargaining as to what we can expect from the different job titles and classifications?
Well, it's good practice for a city to do a classification and compensation study it's somewhat regularly. In this case, I think we actually, and I'm looking to Heather to correct me if I'm wrong, I think we actually negotiated to do a classification and compensation study.
We did agree to do it.
So we're bound to do it by our MOUs.
Yeah, and that was my only question was, I understand that we're bound by contract to perform this study. Okay. All right, is there anyone from the public who has any questions or comments on this? Tim, come on back.
It's been a while since I've been up here. Thanks. So let's see, I'll try to modify my comments given the prior words that have been spoken. So this study is going to take 4 months. The scope is to look at job categories, make sure there's ADA and FLSA compliance, so that's American Disabilities Act, and also the Fair Labor Standards Act, which translates to the overtime pay. If you're in violation of either of these, there are some pretty hefty fines that go along with them. You can refer to your attorney. She'll tell you that overtime fines, of course, are double back pay on anything that hasn't been paid. Over years, that can add up to big dough if that's been a violation. The fact that this hasn't been done for 20 years suggests maybe it wasn't needed to be done, or somebody took their eye off the ball. The market changes all the time. Job descriptions have to be modified all the time. It's just something that's typically done regularly. Bryce Consulting takes an old school approach to compensation. They are a look backward entity as opposed to a look forward entity. And I'd be curious to know if they're a proponent of merit-based pay or not, if this is just going to be roll the dice and we're going to see what can be negotiated with the collective bargaining unit over a period of a contract and see what percentage or nickels or pennies are going to be paid hourly year after year after year. The fact that a union endorses a consultant suggests that they like what the consultant's going to come back already and they've got that experience. And even though this is a $65,000 consulting fee, the city may end up paying a lot more than that based on the recommendations provided by the consultant. If the city is having issues with attrition or hiring, typically compensation is not going to solve that problem. A few years back, I took over a situation with a multi-billion-dollar corporation and 5,000 employees, and we had 26% attrition or turnover, and we paid at 85% of market midpoint, which means the midpoint of the grade was at 85%, which is astronomically high. Our issue wasn't pay. Our issue was leadership, culture, work conditions, job content, job satisfaction. Those were the things that we had to address over time. It took us 2 years to do that. We kept pay where it was. It was all merit-based, and we reduced attrition to 9%, which in return brought shareholder performance to a very high level and also morale within the corporation to a high level. I've got a bit of experience in this area. I really suggest that you might want to take a look at another provider or two who's forward-thinking rather than taking a look back. Bryce doesn't have a reputation for regressing their data either. That's very important in a study like this. They also like to be a sole provider of data as opposed to doing a broad spectrum approach, which means it would be a proprietary approach to their data. And you want as big of a reach outside the market as you possibly can to see where you fit. I'd also imagine that this is going to be done for more than just the collective bargaining unit, but also for the salaried employees as well. And actually, 4 months to do a study like this is a long time. It should be closer to 6 weeks. If anybody on the council would like to talk with me about this later on, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Anyone else in the audience have a question or comment on this item? Okay, I'll close the public comment on this item, and I just wanted to reach out to staff, and if there were a few questions about merit-based pay and things like that. Is that part of the study, or is that unknown at this point?
What's being studied is the classifications each employee's in. They'll actually be doing a desk study and a review of their job to make sure the job description is accurate. And then whether it's merit-based pay or steps, that's all based on the MOU. So what we're going to do is compare what employees in the same job description are getting paid in other cities and the other compensation items, not just that base pay, but those other compensation items, and look at total compensation to the full employee base.
And just to add, we have had merit-based pay here in the past for management and mid-management, and went away from that years ago back to the traditional STEP program. So I'm sure that's something that they will take a look at as well.
Okay, I'll bring it back to the council for discussion and action.
Well, first of all, Tim, thank you for, where'd he go? He's back in the corner. Just wanted to thank you for, it's clear you have some knowledge on this topic, and I appreciate, you speaking up. I know for me, it's important that no matter what the study is, that the data points or the data gathering, that there's some agreement with that. So, if I can see the concern about, okay, if the unions are endorsing this guy, then there's some concern, but at the same time, I don't want to get into something. I mean, we've heard just at the last council meeting about RFPs for tourism studies where, oh, well, you're not including this or that. And my concern is I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with the data that's gathered. And it's important for me, coming from the private sector to government, it is hard when you're looking at this stuff and you don't have a baseline that hasn't been set for 20 years or hasn't been analyzed for 20 years. And for me, it's important to get some kind of baseline so we understand where everybody is compared to our city, because people automatically go, oh, well, Healdsburg has 11,000 residents, 12,000 residents. Windsor has this many, and cost per resident is this. Oh, you're overpaying, you're underpaying. Oh, so it's a discussion I've heard multiple times, and I also heard it up in, we had a pretty good discussion up in at the League of California Cities meeting with the mayor of Carmel, where we started talking about some of these things. So I think it is important when, as a city, to get some of these baseline, some information that we can look at and rely upon to know that position X should be compensated this and their job duties should be that, and then we can make adjustments from there. So that was my thought process in this, and that's why I was okay with it.
Yeah, I'd like to echo your sentiment about thanking Mr. Unger for stepping up. I think, it's funny, a lot of, we get caught up in some of the more sexy topics like the HGID, tourism, all that, these topics, but some of the more mundane topics like a class and comp study can be mundane. And I think it's, we have a lot of smart people in our community. I appreciate Mr. Unger pitching in for these, your insight on these more underappreciated topics. So I would love to get your feedback as we move forward. I think for me, having the buy-in from both sides, and we hired the negotiator as a consultant, and he gave us some what I thought was useful and productive feedback. The fact that both parties are behind Bryce was to me the selling point. And they're going to give us data, sorely needed data, from which point we can start looking and asking and evaluating. But I think at this point, I'm comfortable with moving forward with getting the data from Bryce at this price, and then let's move forward.
My discomfort comes up more about culture and leadership and communication issues. And so I understand that issue, and I know that everyone's here to talk about money anyway, and we're going to get some data given to us, and we're going to get numbers, and everything's going to crunch. And we're going to find out that people cost money to do these things. And what comes up for me, and I'm just glad that the staff is here tonight to hear this, including city manager and assistant city manager, I do have concerns about just looking at us as a small town and comparing us over and over to other towns. And that was something that came up in bargaining for me over and over, is the value of, well, what if they leave? What if they leave? We have to give more money. And I totally want to pay my workers. I get unions. I'm in a union. But I do think there's some good information here for all of us to think about, those attributes of why people leave a job and why they stay. And I know in a job, some of the jobs that people take for their life don't make a lot of money, but they like what they do. And I think that that's just something we need to pay attention to no matter what. I don't love paying this money. I don't even like it. I don't appreciate the fact that it costs so much for people to do consultant work. When I look at other jobs that certainly don't make that much, and the time frame doesn't make me comfortable either. When I hear somebody say it's supposed to be a 6-week job and we're dealing with 4 months. But I'm hoping that with everything that's been brought up, that we can 4 months. Is it 4 months instead of 6 months?
The staff report actually says no more than 4 months. I have never seen a class and comp study take 6 weeks.
Well, as long
that
as we're heightened, I mean, we just have to be
ridiculously
sensitive.
unrealistic to me.
Yeah, sensitive to the transparency of government and how much it costs to do anything to get things done. And it's certainly not an attack. It's just being aware. So I want to make sure that we listen to what we're hearing as far as attrition and why people leave, and also looking at jobs and what we can do to create cultures of communication and make people feel good, as well as pay them. I think that's really interesting. So I thank you for your information tonight.
You know what? I was actually wrong on that. The stuff, it could take until January 1st, 2019, which I actually think is much more realistic. More than 4 months, much more than 4 months. It could take over, until January 1st, 2019. The lengthy part there is the classification portion. The compensation study isn't that difficult, but the classification portion, it requires interviewing employees, looking at job descriptions. It's a complicated process.
Okay. Well, if there's no other discussion, I'd be happy to offer a resolution. The City of Healdsburg approving an agreement between the City of Healdsburg and Bryce Consulting for a class and compensation study, authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement and increasing fiscal year 2017-18 appropriations.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember Hagley?
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mansell? Mayor McCaffrey?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 7, we have no public hearings. And then on to item 8A, conditionally award a contract for trench and excavation related to the underground utility district of Healdsburg Avenue and Mill Street to Staggs Construction Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $1,835,263.97. Director Crowley.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As you've just stated, before you have a resolution that conditionally awards the Healdsburg Avenue Mill Street Underground Utility District to Staggs Construction for a not to exceed amount, authorize the city manager to execute the contract on the city's behalf, and also related change orders up to 20% of the bid price, and amends the fiscal year 2017-18 budget. To provide a little bit of background, with the five-way construction project, the city council also formed an underground utility district along Healdsburg Avenue and Mill Street. The underground utility district requires all utilities with overhead wires and cables to place those facilities underground. The undergrounding of the facilities requires the installation of conduits, boxes, and ground-mounted equipment for each of the utilities involved. To install the needed conduits and boxes, the city requested bids from qualified contractors to perform this work. A little bit more about the undergrounding utility district process and obligations as a background information. After the formation of the undergrounding utility district, the local government agency requires all overhead utilities to go underground. With this requirement, each participant has a varying level of financial responsibility. And so under the California Public Utility Commission, there's certain tariffs that obligate AT&T and Comcast to pay their share of the undergrounding cost. That's in exchange for the use of the city's right-of-way and other things that have been negotiated over years. But essentially, the AT&T and Comcast have to participate financially in the project. Costs included paying a portion of the joint trench work, and they also include the cost to install or remove AT&T and Comcast facilities. So for the joint trench portion of the work, which is what we're talking about tonight, AT&T and Comcast's share of this portion of the work is roughly about 45% of the project cost. So the city will get a reimbursement on this project. The underground utility projects overview, just to show the extent of the project. So the five-way is roughly just the footprint of the intersection, but the underground utility district extends beyond that. All of Mill Street from the Highway 101 overpass all the way to Center Street, and then Healdsburg Avenue from the five-way intersection all the way down to the intersection of Exchange. There's a small portion of Exchange that also will be undergrounded as well. It's roughly about 3,000 feet and about 125 boxes, so it's a pretty significant project. So as far as the bid process went, in June of this year, we provided a notice to bidders, received 2 bids in August. Upon review of those bids, we found that those bids were non-responsive for varying reasons. At the August 21st council meeting, upon having no responsive bids to award, the council directed staff to re-advertise the project and to gain more bids. On August 25th, staff re-advertised the bids and received 3 bids on September 12th. Upon review of those bids, Terracon Constructors provided the apparent low bid for an amount of $1,797,381. Terracon, however, did not demonstrate past work in the installation of dry utility joint trenches, and therefore their bid was determined non-responsive. Stakes Construction of Sebastopol provided the next lowest bid for an amount of $1,835,263.97. Stakes bid contained a minor administrative irregularities that included math errors and a non-standard bid sheet. Nothing that's substantial or would give an indication to the city that they would not be able to perform the work. Stakes is primarily engaged in the work of installing dry utility joint trenches and therefore is well qualified to perform the work. So recommendation from staff is to find Terracon's bid non-responsive and conditionally award the contract to the next lowest bidder, Staggs Construction. Staff is also recommending the approval of 20% contingency to account for unknowns inherent of all construction projects. The congestion of the existing underground utilities, there's a lot of stuff in the street to work around. So there's a lot of unknowns in those costs, and also allow some work to happen outside of normal business hours. And this is intended to help accommodate some of the businesses that are impacted by this construction project. It also, staff is recommending the increase of the fiscal year 17-18 capital replacement budget to support the project. Funding from this project will initially come from the electric capital replacement budget. So with that, that concludes staff's report, and if there's any questions from council, I'd be happy to answer them.
Councilmember Nyokas.
Yeah, a quick question. So just to clarify, the sources coming from, of the funds coming from the electric capital replacement budget, right?
Yes.
Can you explain why that budget in particular, and maybe not other sources of funds, impact?
So as an obligation, the city's electric department is obligated to underground their overhead utility wires. So we're a participant in the joint trench. And so the other 55% of the cost for this project will be borne by the electric department. So it's appropriate to pull the money and the funding from the electric department's funds.
Might there be other potential sources of funding to reimburse the city for that work based on the benefits to the neighbors in that district?
Not that I'm aware of. And we started this project well ahead of, I guess maybe what you're suggesting is replay pay for some of this. We started this project well ahead of any awareness of replay. A lot of the undergrounding has to do with frontage of existing businesses that probably won't develop anytime soon. So if the city wants to move forward with the project, the city's going to have to fund it.
Right. Okay, thanks.
So clearly there was a question earlier during public comment regarding the activity that this would be creating at that section again of our town. So I'm just wondering, with the roundabouts delays, I'm just curious how this bid and acceptance and award of this contract to the Sebastopol company, how is that going to be dealt with in terms of construction timing? Or does it coincide with where we are with the roundabout? Or
so some of the work will coincide. What we're planning to do is some of the work that Bay Cities needs to finish up with, they won't be able to do during the wintertime, but this dry utility joint trench contractor, they can do some work during the wintertime. So we're trying to interlace the project. There's going to be certainly some coordination challenges as we go through the project, but a lot of the work, since it has a much bigger footprint than the roundabout, is going to allow the contractor to kind of move around. But certainly we're clearly aware of issues for the businesses, and we're going to try and minimize those impacts as much as possible.
so by awarding this bid tonight, if that happens, then we're just waiting for the communications to take place between the current project and where we are going down the lane or the street. I'm just curious what kind of impact it's going to have. But I mean, obviously it's going to be a done deal if we say yes, but I'm just curious how it all times out in terms of like what the timeframes would be.
So I guess as far as timeframes, our biggest challenge is Mill Street between Center and the 5-way intersection. So we want to get in there as fast as we can and get that piece of the work done, and that would allow Bay Cities to continue to progress forward. The other areas of Bay Cities construction site are not as impacted with requirements for joint trench. A lot of the joint trench work is really outside of the footprint of Bay Cities project. Certainly we're going to be trenching in front of businesses. We're going to try and keep that to a minimum as much as possible, work with those businesses to schedule things around their business hours as much as we possibly can. But there is going to be a minor disruption. It's a construction project. But the end result of improving the aesthetics and of the corridor, Mill Street and Healdsburg Avenue, I think is going to be a plus for all the businesses.
Councilmember Higley.
Just out of curiosity, why was this not included in the original roundabout bid?
So originally we started to work with GHD and kind of quickly realized that the specialty of the work was better handled by the city contracting directly with another contractor that specialized in the design of the joint trench and pulling together those specifications and bid projects. So we pulled the work outside of the original contract. The other piece of not contracting this work in there had to do with some of the design timelines not lining up exactly. But the other piece too is that the storm drains, the sewer, those are all gravity feeds, and they have to have an exact and precise slope to work. For dry utilities, we can bend up and down and around and move around that stuff. So typical construction procedure is to get all your wet utilities in first, and then you come in after that and do your dry utilities. And so we've kind of held this back to the end of the project, seeing where Bay Cities was finishing the wet utilities, and then pushed it forward.
Any other questions?
If the Mill District does what they're going to do and puts in what I think I know they're going to do, at least at this time, then there'll also be construction right after this is done. I mean, I know it's all speculation in terms of what's going to happen literally, but that's really the pacing, right? Is that roundabout at the same time we have the issue of the underground utility district, get all that done all the way down, and then we're moving into construction in that zone no matter what.
Yeah, but I think that the replace construction is going to be all on site. There's very little that I would imagine is going to be out in the street. And I also, from my limited understanding of what replace schedule is I don't see them doing a lot of work anytime soon.
So if we wanted to have a bike lane, just pretend right along there in front of replay, this has no effect. This underground utilities, we're not going to be pouring sidewalks and
No.
developing parking areas in front of that particular piece of property. Just curious about that.
Okay, seeing no more questions from council, I'll open up to the public. If there's any questions or comments on this item. Mr. Amato, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. I am a bit confused, and I was hoping that you could unconfuse me. There was a lot of chatter that was on our social networks, and 3 of them that I referring to our 5-way intersection project as a roundabout project, and I tried to clarify that a lot of those costs had to do with the undergrounding of utilities. And as I recall, the cost of that is $10 million roughly. I know the scope has been changed a little bit with regard to improvements in landscaping and so forth to reduce that. And there was a 10% contingency, so about $11 million. And I consistently pointed out to those who were criticizing what was going on that a lot of those dollars were related to the underground work. The roundabout itself, which has not yet been started, we have what I call a faux roundabout. It's a circular intersection that has none of the geometric features, and I know that because the design engineer, with the support of our director, made it possible for me to sit down with the design engineer and understand completely the traffic flow and all the design considerations. And because I was originally opposed to the roundabout, and after listening to him and doing some research of my own, I changed my position. But anyway, with regard to the financing, I'm still confused as to why this particular effort was not, as Councilman Hagley asked, why this wasn't included in the original $11 million project.
Thank you. Thank you, Mel. Anybody else? Okay, I'll close the public comment. Director Crowley, can you answer Mr. Amato?
I think because of the project's maybe a little bit bigger and the specialized work, it was pulled apart as a separate piece. I mean, certainly there's a significant amount of underground wet utilities that were upgraded and replaced with the 5-way roundabout, and the thought process with that is that once you put this beautiful cap of the roundabout, which is going to happen at some point, you don't want to cut that up and replace utilities. You don't want to replace the sewer that's aging in there. You don't want to replace the wastewater or the water system that's aging in there. You don't want to replace the storm drains that are basically at this point failing in there. So, so that was the intent, that there is a significant amount of wet utilities that's going to be buried underneath this project, and that's driving the cost up much more than what a paving project and sidewalk project would be by itself. Why the electric utility and the joint trench was separated out as a side project, for me, it was just more about managing the project closer and working with the specialized trades and designers that work towards the dry utilities. It just has a different set of requirements.
Yeah, I can kind of think of it in a little bit of a way of, when everybody goes and does the wet utilities, those are all fresh and nice in the ground. You know exactly where they are. So like you were saying before, the dry utilities can snake around everything. So it's really easy to know exactly where you're going to put everything. That's how I'm kind of.
Yeah, there's some flexibility in the joint trench, in that design and working around what the wet utilities are. The wet utilities just don't have as much flexibility in where they lay and where they go in the street.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the council for discussion and action. Councilmember Gold?
Well, is there further discussion? Then I'll offer a resolution of the City Council of Healdsburg conditionally awarding the Healdsburg Avenue Mill Street Underground Utility District project to Staggs Construction Incorporated for an amount not to exceed $1,835,263.97, authorizing the city manager to execute the contract on the city's behalf and related change orders up to 20% of the bid price, and amending the fiscal year 2017-18 budget.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Gold,
Yes.
Councilmember Higley,
Yes.
Councilmember Naokis,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Mansell, Mayor McCaffrey.
Yes. The resolution passes. Okay, now we move on to the main event. 8B, renewal of the Healdsburg Tourism Improvement District. Assistant City Manager Ippoliti.
Good evening, Mayor McCaffrey and council members. Before you tonight are two recommendations. Receive a report on the assessment of the Tourism Improvement District prepared by Robert Eiler from Economic Forensics and Analytics, and consider adopting a resolution of intention to renew the Healdsburg Tourism Improvement District and establish the time and place for a public meeting and public hearing. Tonight, we're gonna discuss next steps in the renewal process, provide a little bit of background information, property and business district law, provide a history of the Healdsburg Tourism Improvement District, discuss the proposal provided by the district, the city's role in renewing that district, the report from Robert Eiler, and then I'm going to give an opportunity for the chair of the district to also provide a presentation. So, the renewal process. Consider a resolution of intention tonight and set that public meeting and public hearing dates. Ideally, hold the public meeting on November 6th, hold the public hearing on November 20th, and then consider a resolution of formation. That could happen on the 20th, and consider contract to administer the chamber also could happen on the 20th. The current chamber expires on December 31st, so to renew this, ideally, it will happen before December 31st. By adopting the resolution tonight, the district is not renewed. It requires 2 additional public meetings, giving the council and the public additional opportunities to consider and voice an opinion. That background I talked about. The Property and Business Improvement District Law of 1994 grants cities and counties the authority to establish and renew business improvement districts. The purpose of the district is to levy assessments against property and businesses in the district, pay for the cost of certain activities and improvements benefiting property or businesses paying the assessment. District is customized to meet the needs to the district and are designated, created, and governed by businesses paying assessments. There's an adopted district management plan that governs the district and outlines boundaries, the assessment, improvements, activities to be funded, and the term of the district. Funds are collected by businesses, paid to the city via the TOT return, and distributed to the Owners Association, represented by the chamber, to administer per the management plan. Funds cannot be redirected to other programs and must be utilized in conformance with the management plan. The district was developed and formed in 2013. The district provides stable funding for marketing and sales promotion efforts of lodging businesses in Healdsburg. In fiscal year 15-16, the district collected an estimated $577,000. That's equal to 2% of the gross rental revenue, hotel revenue. Monies are collected at the same time as, but are separate from the TOT. The district formed a 5-year term ending December 31st, 2017. In January, the city received a notice from the district wishing to renew. The proposal received from the district, that management plan, proposes to continue the district generally as it currently exists. the district to include all lodging businesses existing and future in the city. Currently, there's 31. All lodging business owners would continue to pay an annual assessment of 2% of gross short-term room rental revenue collected on stays of 30 days or less, a term of 10 years. It would go out to December 31st, 2027. The city would continue to collect that monthly assessment and forward to the Owners Association, and the chamber would continue to serve as the Owners Association, managing the funds, implementing the programs, and providing annual reports. Proposed activities to be funded included district development projects, estimated at 20% or about $120,000. 5% goes to the city to essentially to recover our costs for collecting the funds. 10% towards administration and operations, 60% sales and marketing, and there's a 5% contingency in there. When we talk about district development projects that are proposed, includes one on transportation and parking for $90,000 and cultural and arts for $30,000, and I'm sure the district chair can expand on what they have in mind for that. The city's role in renewing that district. At this point, the city may modify this management plan as proposed, including reducing the proposed assessment, modifying the proposed activities funded by the assessment, as long as those activities are allowed under law. Examples include parking, trash receptacles, public restrooms, parks, sidewalks, and plazas. If the district is renewed, per the proposed draft management plan, the city council and the district board have the authority to adjust budget allocations between categories by no more than 15% of the total budget per year. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Robert Eiler for his presentation.
Welcome, Rob.
Just 1 second.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I did a report to kind of show my take in terms of a forecast in terms of both TOT and the HTID revenues, and they both would walk parallel lines. So this basically just repeats what Heather just broke down, the now current state of the overnight tax here in Healdsburg, where HTID is getting 2% of that. But a lot of what I'm going to talk about actually is looking forward. And so generally speaking, most economists that look at the tourism industry or look at California's economy suggest that we're going to see growth basically commensurate with the growth of the California economy. There's not much deviation from that. Most economists think that California is going to grow about 2.5%, and tourism revenue is going to basically follow that, just a little bit under about 2% going forward to 2021. The trick is nobody's going out any farther than that just yet. But the way that the forecasts are starting to evolve in terms of the California economy, it's my supposition that you're going to see any tourism forecast basically follow that and maybe just a little bit lower, but not by much. A lot of it is through domestic visitation, meaning you're going to see more visitors coming from the U.S. rather than overseas, and specifically in domestic leisure travel and not necessarily business travel. So a lot of the forecast that's happening at the California level and driving visitors to California as a context for what might happen in Sonoma County and Healdsburg more locally is going to be through more leisure than business. And actually that's meant to grow a little bit faster to California than the other parts of travel, which then average out to a little bit about, like I said, just about 2% per annum. One of the real pieces of this is that international travel is starting to slow down. And so we saw a real pickup in international travel right after the recession began. And that has been slowly fading, partially because of diminishing returns and also because we've seen a lot of up and down in the international economy such that visitors are not coming at the same pace they were right after the recession happened and the American tourism dollar was going pretty far at the time. However, there's still expectations that there's going to be growth. It's just starting to slow down. But all in all, the forecast looks decent. It's not amazing, but the forecast, and as far as the context is concerned, it looks good. So just some looking back briefly as context for the forecast. This is hospitality employment level in California. And you can see this is all as an index because the sizes of California, Healdsburg, and Sonoma County are all different than each other. So you can see the slow rise since 1994 where you can sort of see the dip in these numbers as the recession happened, bottomed out, and then slowly went up again as we've seen over the last 7 or 8 years. This is what Healdsburg looks like in contrast. So Healdsburg's really seen a pickup in terms of employment that's specific to hospitality within the city. And this is what Sonoma County looks like. Sonoma County follows more what happens in California. And then Healdsburg has outpaced that by quite a bit since, let's say, 2014. In Sonoma County is the only place I can really find anything that looked like average daily rates that were consistent across the marketplace and occupancy rates. And as you may or may not know, the combination of average daily rate, which is asked for by the hotels, and the occupancy, which actually is occupied within the rooms that are available, make up a very important statistic called RevPAR, or basically the revenue that's generated for every available room daily. This is what the ADR looks like in Sonoma County over the last almost 10 years now. And this is what the occupancy rate looks like. So the ADR in dollars is on the left-hand axis and the occupancy rate in percentages on the right-hand axis. And the combination of the two is, as I said, what the industry calls RevPAR. And what you can see from this graph, if you think about the combination of the two, is that we've seen slowly rising RevPAR. RevPAR is ultimately the genesis of TOT, because it's what revenue you actually generate that then the tax is borne by. So that's slowly going up. This is actually what TOT looks like. This is in Healdsburg, and this is in Sonoma County as an index. So you can see that Healdsburg, generally speaking, specifically after the recession, which is illustrated right here, has started to outpace the growth of Sonoma County overall, and has flattened out a little bit recently as Sonoma County has picked up. So I'll come back to this theme in a minute, but generally speaking, Healdsburg has seen a really nice recovery in terms of TOT, historically speaking, specifically over the last 6 or 7 years. This is TOT revenue overall among the municipalities in Sonoma County. You can see here that Healdsburg generates, we'll talk a little bit more in a minute, about a little over $3 million in the as of the end of 2015-16. The 2016-17 data are coming. It's larger than Petaluma overall in terms of how much tax is generated, and basically larger than most of the other places in Sonoma County except for Rohnert Park, Sonoma, and Santa Rosa. But if you think about Healdsburg relative size, Sonoma is probably the best next comparison, as Santa Rosa and Rohnert Park are bigger in size. So the forecast assumptions in basic sense is we took 459 taxable rooms to get started and looked over the horizon toward 2027 and said there would be maybe upwards of 291 more rooms over that forecast horizon. We started with the baseline of 3.058 million in terms of TOT, with the revenues just under 577,000, as Heather suggested, for HTID in specific, and that the rates are not going to change over the forecast window, and that there's 3 scenarios: 2% growth of RevPAR, which is that product of the ADR and the occupancy rate, 5% growth of it, and 7% growth of it. And what you're going to see in a minute is a graph that basically shows you a forecast spread or window or variance that you can look at and say, okay, well, it may not be any of these, but it's most likely going to be somewhere in the path in between the low growth rate and the higher growth rate. The higher growth rate is really an accelerated growth rate based on both movement up of RevPAR and the new rooms walking hand in hand very quickly. The 2% growth rate suggests that there may be some flattening over time, and then the 5 is basically walking down the middle and based on historic average. So this is the RevPAR forecast, and I'm sorry that that bottom piece is jammed right up against that table as far as the sources are concerned, but it basically illustrates the point that in the 3 scenarios, you can see the ascension of revenue per day, or per basically per room available, and you can see it walking up in the shorter or the slower scenario at 205 by the end of the fiscal year 2026-2027, up to potentially $330 a night. The $330 a night is a very, very fast growth rate. 205 seems maybe a little bit more conservative, and 274, just thinking about where things have been recently, is not that far afield. We've seen probably somewhere on the range of about $75 or $80 since the recession bottomed out in terms of an ascension of RevPAR here in Healdsburg. At least that's what we're estimating. So another $100 over another 10 years is not that shocking. A lot of it's going to depend on continued demand, which you can imagine. and the conversion of visitors to overnights. And that's really the big economic development challenge, is how much more can be done in both those respects as the number of rooms grow. So here come to look at the forecast scenarios and looking at, this is TOT in specific. So the TOT for the city would be 7.8 on the slow scenario at the end of 2026, 2027. That is the medium scenario, and my lines are for some reason not showing up. I apologize for that, but that's the 2026, 2027 end point. And then that's where we started at 3058, and we end on the very fast one at 12,662,000. So you can see that there's a couple of things, and this is why I put these little shaded areas. This is the beginning of the bump, both from an acceleration of the number of rooms, and then you see it again here. So when you're seeing those sort of discrete jumps, that discrete jump is happening because there's an infusion of new rooms, which is giving a boost to the overall marketplace. And as a result of that, the parallel would be the HTID forecast scenario. So this is revenue on top of what you just saw, and that's just under 577,000 in the baseline year, all the way up to, in the slow growth scenario, you can see here 1.12 million, just under 1.5, and a little bit over 1.8, depending on the speed of growth of RevPAR and the number of rooms. So as you can imagine, as TOT grows based on the way it is collected, as Heather suggested, both TOT for the city use and TOT for HTID are going to walk hand in hand. Another piece I was asked to look at was on sales tax, and something is, there's some intriguing pieces of looking at this. This is 2010, and looking at taxable sales as reported by the Board of Equalization and the median household income in Healdsburg. And you can see median household income in 2010, according to the Census Bureau, was a little over 62,000 per household, but that per capita, Healdsburg generated a little over 25,000, which was the highest in Sonoma County per person. Now, what does that suggest? What it suggests is that the Healdsburg economy generates a lot of revenue and a lot of resources from what happens in the tourism industry. And it then feeds back in terms of how much is available as a resource per person against what otherwise might be true in terms of taxable sales. So taxable sales in Healdsburg are very much, if you think about this as a comparison data point, driven by what happens with the flow of tourists. And that's true also in 2015, which, for better or for worse, is the latest data available. But you can see that now it's up somewhere on the range of 33,000 per person in terms of taxable sales versus the $65,000 level of median household income. So as taxable sales rise, it does remind you that a lot of what happens here is because of tourism in terms of taxable sales, with only 11,000 people in town. So to end the analysis, I wanted to give you some challenges. I mean, part of the growth and sort of some of the things when you look at a forecast, you have to think about what can disrupt that forecast. Part of it is thinking about housing and how you're going to see some evolution in the arguments around housing versus hotel versus parking, which of course are age-old issues here in Healdsburg. That's something that can challenge the forecast. How housing as an issue gets in the way of the growth of hotel rooms or the growth of tourism will impede the forecast I gave you. How you all work it out as a city is up to you, but you got to think that in terms of looking at the forecast and saying, why is this not working? Part of it can be because there's been a disruption in the flow of those rooms or the flow of tourism based on something else going on. Housing could be one of those topics. Commuting, one of the things that also comes up is as you grow, where are you going to find laborers? And one of the key aspects of doing local economic development and looking forward is saying, as you see growth of population and growth of business, you need to expect that there's still going to be some commuting. As much as you want to house people that work at low wages, you're still going to have a labor demand from your local businesses that's going to mean inbound commuting. So you have to be thinking about that as another node of concern as you see growth. Supporting the businesses, the other piece is to recognize that without local support of the businesses, that growth forecast may not hold because some businesses may walk away from this marketplace if they're not supported. So it assumes that there won't be really any loss of business going forward and that the businesses are going to be retained and going to want to be here. So that support is also part of economic development in terms of thinking about a tourism forecast. Another piece is competition. This assumes that competition, in a sense, is part of either the slower scenario if it becomes more fierce, or if Healdsburg continues to differentiate itself as a global player in the tourism market. It may not be that big a deal, but that's kind of the dice you're rolling when you go into a growth strategy, is how competitive are you going to be over time. And you have to believe that between Napa County, southern Sonoma County, and God only knows what's going to happen in places like Lake County or Mendocino County, you need to expect more competition. So one of the challenges to seeing the forecast all the way through is as competition rises, how will Healdsburg hold up against that threat? One of the big things I talk about all the time are the macroeconomic issues involved and how will this current cycle end. So we're now almost in the longest post-war recovery period that we've seen in the United States, but it's been also one of the slowest. The beauty of having a slow recovery cycle after a relatively major recession is that you expect the next recession to be relatively mild because there's no reason for it to be that hard. We'll see. The real key is not when this cycle ends and how hard the next recession is, but what the next cycle will look like, because this forecast window should take us through what I would consider to be a relatively mild recession and then hopefully a little bit more speedy next recovery cycle. So part of this is recognizing that we are likely to grow some more, probably toward about the midpoint of this forecast window. Then how long we recess and how mild or non-mild that recession is will then, in a sense, dictate the starting point of the next upswing, which will eat up most of the forecast window. So the supposition, given the current growth forecast for the U.S., the California, and Sonoma County's economies, that should take us through halfway. And with a relatively mild recession likely awaiting us on the other side of this, most of the forecast window should be positive non-recession growth time. So in terms of overall context, bottom line is that things look good going forward, and that's really why the forecasts have those three possibilities where there's no reason to think that history won't repeat itself. In the sense, the middle forecast is probably likely. The speedy one is less likely, and the 2% is likely very conservative. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Heather.
Actually, before we bring up Brian Summer, the district chair, for his presentation, I'd like to give the council an opportunity to ask Robert Eiler any questions.
Councilmember Niokas.
Yes, I would like to refer to Figure 8, which actually is a different version of Figure 4 in your actual assessment document. In those figures, there's an interesting anomaly in the growth pattern, which is the November 16 through April 17.
In the occupancy and ADR?
ADR, yeah. Can you explain that?
It's probably seasonality.
But there's no seasonality for the previous periods.
Well, there's probably less seasonality. That's the only thing I can think of, is that there was more seasonality that was in that one period vis-a-vis the remainder. So even if you seasonally adjust data, it doesn't mean that you still will not have anomalous data that will show more seasonality than previous time periods in the same month that were less seasonal. Does that make sense?
I think I follow you. But you don't. So you're looking at the period, which is November through April, which is winter.
Correct.
And you're saying
some winters are worse than others.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. Interesting.
But you can see, if you look backward, like in 2013 and 2015, you'll see the same, or let's say not the same magnitude, but similar hiccups around the wintertime.
Right. Okay.
I had a quick question. What's your assumption for inflation over the period for these increased revenues?
The current is at 2%. I mean, that seems to be what we're seeing in the bond market in terms of looking forward, and the delta between what we're seeing in long bonds and short bonds, which is usually the best market assessment of long-term inflation expectations.
Thank you.
Of course.
On the backdrop of this, it says that the city council, the city hired you, HTID reimbursed the city's cost, and you were to undertake an assessment of the HTID, including a forecast of the revenues, and also how these revenues might be utilized to offset tourism impacts on local residents and resources. Did that half get in the, do you feel like it represented, just because you were sharing how much money can be made? Is that what you were suggesting, that the impacts are offset by the dollars that we are going to accrue because we have access to them in our local economy?
Yeah, so when you read the report, I talked about sort of best practices in using money to attack potential issues. So that's in the report. I ended up not talking about it too much tonight because I felt like it was going to be talked about in other ways, and it may change depending on the what it flares up over time.
How unique are we in Healdsburg? I mean, I completely understand. I mean, last time I was up here, or you were here, it was my first few months on council trying to make sense out of something you said really intriguing about leaks and economy and how If you don't have local people buying things, no matter what you're doing with this, you've got to have consistency. And that's what I took away, and perhaps that was a subjective takeaway. But my question is, how unique are we? Because we certainly, if you look at our economy in terms of our market rate housing, our rents, and certainly our economy in terms of the hospitality workers that you suggested, we have more needs than other cities that are in compared to. I'm just wondering, how unique are we, Professor Eiler?
I think there's two major unique points about Healdsburg. One is its location, and the second one is how it's marketed itself. So if you think of location, it is on the upper end of a relatively broadening, suburban / metropolitan area. If you look at everything that happens in the North Bay and many arguments we have over whether or not we're rural or suburban or urban, the bottom line is we have a large labor market and a large tourism market to our south and to our southeast from here. So one of the things locationally is that you're going to constantly be challenged here in terms of drawing in labor, drawing them here to live, especially younger labor. And you deal with this all the way down basically to the Golden Gate Bridge, depending on what industry you're in. There's an enormous magnet that happens in the core Bay Area, especially the last 6 years, drawing in younger, talented labor across all industries. And as the minimum wage issues have evolved, it's become even a stronger magnet, especially on the margin, to pull younger labor over the bridges. So the farther you are away from, let's say, core labor force, the more challenging labor issues can become. So in that sense, it's unique in that it is a market that is worldwide known, but is going to constantly be challenged with where you're going to find labor, where are they going to live, how are they going to commute in, and how much space you're going to allocate to basically support resources on the infrastructure side. The other side, which I think is the more important piece, is that labor will come over time because Healdsburg has marketed itself over the last 7 or 8 years and become much more unique in the marketplace and much more positively received, I should say, with the idea that demand has continued to grow and grow and grow as Healdsburg has become more and more differentiated as a global place for people to come and visit for wine, food, and kind of, if you can think of like an adult experience. The more that happens and the more that can really be fostered, the more those other issues that are relatively negative can kind of somewhat be washed away, but you're always going to have logistics and labor issues based on location. Of course.
Yeah, some more questions about your figures.
Sure.
Specifically, figure 16, where you break down the tax collections by industry. Because you quote in your presentation the 381 million revenue for 2015, but really the elephant in the room here is the $92 million from motor vehicle and parts, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you actually included the motor vehicle in your assessment of retail revenue, but it's actually, tourists don't buy cars in Healdsburg, right?
Correct.
So how would that affect your analysis of the impact of tourism on retail receipts?
It does suggest that if a quarter of your tax receipts are driven by car sales, right, and you are somehow selling cars mainly to your own populace, right? Tourism is also happening when people come to Healdsburg, buy a car, and go home with it. Because an external person has come in, bought something, traveled here, bought something, and left with that something, and left the revenue and the tax revenue in its wake. That's tourism, okay? So if you think about that piece of it, right, we're seeing more of a change, and this is a potential threat to the forecast also in terms of I was doing taxable sales, because over time you're going to see more of an evolution, especially with internet sales, about actually assessing the tax where you live. Car sales have become more of that now, right? We're starting to evolve that way. But so much of it ultimately boils down to, what do you see as the flow of people? If they buy a car, that's one thing. And that's a very loose definition of tourism. You really want to talk about people that are going to stay overnight. That's the true tourism. But business tourism happens all the time. If you think about B2B sales, you have business-to-business taxes. That's another great way of driving sales. But in short, if you take away those sales from there, you will see the per cap go down, but you would have to do that for all the municipalities you see above as well. So comparatively speaking, Healdsburg would still have, I think, some relative reliance on the flow of tourism in terms of driving sales tax revenue.
I'm sorry.
I just want to point out that if we're getting into the minutia with questions, we have a lot of people in the public here that want to speak as well. And I just want to point out that a lot of that could come out from that discussion as well. Just keep that in mind. But go ahead.
Well, I guess in that spirit, I'm okay with deferring to the public, and if anything, it doesn't bubble up, I can certainly.
I know the assistant city manager had the rest of the presentation to go through as well.
Yes, please. I'd like to bring up the chairman of the district to provide his presentation. Thank you, Brian.
Hello, Brian Summer. Nice to meet you.
Hey, Brian.
Councilman, I think your question this on the Smith Travel Research graph with ADR and occupancy, I think the largest driver there is that there's 1,200 new rooms in Sonoma County this year. So when you have an influx of rooms like that, occupancy is going to go down. So that's why you see a little bit of that. So I don't really have a lot to really present to you, because in the same spirit that you just mentioned, Mr. Mayor, there's going to be a lot of feedback from a lot of people. So what I'd like to do is really just field any questions that you have. We've all kind of met. I put a proposal together. To me, the biggest advantage here is that the HTID has come up with the new segment called District Development Funds. And that's really a way that we can take money that has traditionally gone towards sales and marketing Healdsburg to the rest of the world, and kind of put it back into some things that can really benefit the community, offset things that are or mitigate things that come from tourism. So the main part of that, I guess, to understand procedural, is the HTID would like to form a subcommittee within the TID, and we'd like it to consist of a board member from the TID, a representative from the city, and then a representative from the community. We'd like to have those three identify the main priorities for how that money could be spent. So year one, 2018, we kind of estimate that we're going to have $120,000 to spend if things were to move forward as is. And we kind of allocated that. Out of that, 90,000 would go towards parking and transportation solutions. I think parking's been brought up a lot. What we'd like to do is originally we wanted to look at partnering with the city and helping fund a shuttle service where employees could do satellite parking and be bussed in, or tourists could park outside of downtown and be bussed in. So we kind of like that idea. That one might just be a little bit further down the road once that fund grows. Secondary level that we identified was the ability to buy some private parking in town that's currently available. Came out of the last parking study that I think there's over, where we don't occupy all of the parking spaces at peak, which means there's some private parking out there that could be used for public, and we think that would really help the parking situation. And then a more recent idea that kind of came up was, maybe helping out with the license plate reader system. Some items that we haven't really talked about publicly would be looking at a way to sort of incentivize or incorporate Uber or Lyft or those different kind of companies so they could help get transportation from Santa Rosa Airport or from the SMART train once it gets closer, so that people could sort of not drive into Healdsburg but still arrive and stay in Healdsburg. So those are things like, visionary forward thinking that we're thinking about on the parking and transportation. And again, we just want to make downtown a little bit more inviting and a little bit more accessible to everybody all the time. And then the other component, sort of teeing this up for 2018 again, is the arts and the culture. So that could be us investing with the Healdsburg, Jazz Fest. That could be us working with somebody like the Prune Packers. It could be us working with, any of the different art councils. Again, just identifying different areas that we can help with support with grant money so that they can have a little bit more successful events. And again, that would benefit the locals in the community as well, because, I think there's a lot of people that want the arts to grow in Healdsburg, and unless I'm misunderstanding, there's not really a budget for the arts right now. So pretty much that's it from my side. I guess in closing, I know tonight is a vote, and it's going to be a vote yes or a vote no. I guess the way for me to sum it up is if you would vote yes tonight, you'd really be helping me out, because I look at this moving forward to a public hearing, and that's communication. And that gives us a chance to collaborate. It gives us a chance to compromise. It gives us a chance to work together. And I guess my biggest problem through this whole process is that the argument for the HTID has really turned into an emotional argument. And there's some different people that just aren't talking together, working together, and communicating. And those are qualities that I really think we need to have in our community. And so hopefully, that'll lead you to vote yes, perhaps. So after saying all that, do you have any questions?
I wanted to thank you for that presentation. I wanted to kind of ask the council at this point that, kind of in the spirit of what I said earlier, that we have a lot of folks in the public here, a lot to hear about. I know that we have a lot of questions, and there's a lot of ideas that we might have, and I just want to look around and see if you'd like to hear everybody talk first. Is that folks in the public? Thanks, Brian. You're going to be here in case we have any questions afterwards?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you much. Thank you very much. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to the public. And Tim, welcome. If you want to just to kind of keep things going, and there's going to be a lot of folks that want to talk, keep it to 3 minutes or less. And the next person who's going to speak, just come to the middle of the aisle there and kind of form a little line. And yeah, we can do that.
Good thing I got up first.
So yeah.
Thank you, Tim Meinken, Grove Street, Healdsburg. First, I want to just correct one thing. Mr. Eiler said that $92 million in auto sales tax goes to the home of where you live, not to the city where you buy the car. So it does have an impact, is Joe's question. I wanted to talk about this. I think this 2% is a great tax, and we need to realize what the TID represents is the city lending its taxing authority to an entity here in the city, but it's still the city's tax. It's a progressive tax. I think that's great from a progressive standpoint. It's not a regressive tax like raising our sales tax, which goes to the lower income people in a harder way. This is really being paid by tourists that probably have the discretionary dollars to pay for it. My problem with it, the way it's structured currently, is it's a very inefficient tax. If you look at the numbers we just looked at, somewhere between 15 and 20% of this is being spent on administration. 10% by the Chamber of Commerce, 5% to the city, 5% for contingencies. If we're going to tax our tourists 2%, I think we should have a full 2% to spend on what the city needs and what the citizens of the city needs. So I think it's a very inefficient tax, and I think a better way would be for you to perhaps extend this for a year and put this on the ballot and let the citizens vote for an additional 2% TOT tax and let us direct how much we want it, where we want it to go, and how we want it to go. And I know everyone's going to get up behind me from the lodging and retail industry and say we need this to market. Well, they do have their own dollars to market. What we've done is given them the taxing authority of the city to raise their own marketing funds rather than the city having those funds to spend. So again, if you look out in the future, they really only need, if you look out 10 years on Mr. Eiler's middle projection, they will only need about 50 to 60 to 70% of this money to cover their budget. And I'm thinking, why do we need to give them 40 or 50% of the money to control rather than the city deciding where those funds go? Because their budget out in the future, today it's $500,000, out in the future it's about $800,000 or $900,000. We're going to be raising $1.5 million to $2 million. We're doing a tourism study, and we really haven't said what kind of tourists do we want to have. We're just saying we want more of what we've got, and I think we need to look at what other kinds of tourists we can have. And one last question, I know I'm about to lose my time. One of the things, when this goes to the November meeting, I pretty much read the 127-page report. When it goes to the November public session, you all only have the ability to reduce things, not to change it. Tonight you're voting on this. If you read, and maybe the city manager or the city council can explain that you on November 20th will only be able to reduce it, not change it.
Thank you. Alan.
Alan Baker, Josephine Lane. So basic message is yes, please vote to put this to a public session so we have further ability to comment on it. as I get a lot of things through Nextdoor Healdsburg, and this topic came up, people encouraging people to show up and vote this down. And I see comments saying, I'm sick of these tourists. And I'm like, I walk through Georgie Park, I walk past the ballpark on my way here. I'm like, where the hell do these people take vacation? I love this town. I think we've done a great job of building this town into someplace we all want to stay. But I would like to just point out a couple of key things. You saw in those graphs, things were leveling out. Traffic is down and commerce is down downtown. It's flattened, it's dropping. We're way off of last year. I think maybe the roundabout, the improvement on the south end of town might have a role for locals, but it's getting through Petaluma that people coming up here are having trouble with. So you're sitting here at a momentous time. You're dealing with a big infrastructure upgrade. We've got parking trouble. We've got huge infrastructure problems between us and our major city south of us, San Francisco. And to throw parking fees and to eliminate the ability of our lodging industry to try to bring people to town could be the death blow. We might look back at this moment and say, whoops, screwed that up. So just thinking about those, I would say that what this fund does that we were talking about right now, it doesn't just benefit downtown Healdsburg. We talk a lot about parking in downtown. This is every valley that surrounds us. They rely on Healdsburg as the hub of activity for Dry Creek, Chalk Hill, Alexander Valley, Russian River Valley. This is important to other people than just those of us who show up at every one of these meetings and blabber on a little bit. So I would just say this is an important thing to think about. It's not just whether the hotels get some money. We've done a good job of building this into a destination. I think we can't throw that away. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. Michael, welcome. And don't be shy to line up behind Michael here.
Hello, my name is Michael Miller, and I've lived on Tucker Street since 1989, and I worked in Healdsburg in the 70s, so I've been around here long enough to be local. I try really, really hard as I can to love the tourists, and I'm pretty objective. I know that there's a lot of benefit that comes from the tourists. I'm one of those people who feels that we've exceeded that critical mass, and there's a whole lot of negative impacts as far as rentals and the cost of housing and et cetera, that, I mean, there's the good with the bad. So I like the fact that they have a proposal to spend 20% on district development if I still see 60% of the total amount of money being paid for advertising, and I would probably like Healdsburg to be advertised a little bit less and have a greater percentage of any of these kind of taxes go towards parking and towards community things. So that's why I'm not really in favor of renewal just yet. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Don't be shy.
My name is Robert Kennard. I am the Director of Hospitality and Retail Sales for Dry Creek Vineyard. I have lived here in Healdsburg for 20 years. I've been here in Sonoma County for 26 years. So generationally, I'm sort of a newbie around here. But I've been around the block a time or two. Dry Creek Vineyard is a family-owned business. We've been here since 1972. We're 3 generations deep in this family. In this county, we're a sustainably run winery, which means that we not only farm correctly, but we employ 39 people year-round. We work in the agricultural business here in Sonoma County. That's what we do. Sonoma County is a right-to-farm county. And so we have a right to be able to produce our product and to be able to sell that to people. Direct-to-consumer business is the most profitable way that we can make money right now. So direct-to-consumer shortly is people who decide to come to our wonderful city and they decide to venture out into our wineries and they visit us and they buy our wines. They go to our friends' restaurants and they dine there. They stay with our friends who own hotels and B&Bs and they stay there and they contribute to the economy that is flourishing here in Sonoma County. it is imperative that we keep this going. I was here in 2008, as you were as well, and we saw when things didn't go well, and we saw when people got laid off and when businesses went down. And to take the goose that lays the golden egg and try and detour it from doing what it naturally wants to do, we're blessed to be able to live in a place that people want to come and visit. And there are a lot of people, a lot of places that aren't like that. So I would encourage you to keep the tax, the TOT tax, the way that it is. Keep this city thriving and keep this economy going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody else?
Daniel Padilla from the Bella Luna Inn. The TOT tax, as far as I'm concerned, is a blessing. It's actually brought a tremendous amount of tourists to the area and also to our bed and breakfast that we've been operating for 7 years. We just added another room. It's completely full. We're running at 100% right now. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything better to happen. And when I see some of, I guess, the people around us kind of, I guess, putting it down and so forth, not wanting other people to come into town, I have to remind them that basically that even last night we had a guest of ours that went to eat at Bocce. They spent anywhere in the neighborhood of $200 to $300. They went to Cousteau Bakery, where they spent another probably $100. I mean, it just goes on and on and on with the, and I'm not even talking about when we send them basically to the vineyards and they bring back probably anywhere from, I would say, 12 bottles to maybe 24 bottles, and they're shipping them all home, which also leads to our shippers and so forth. But they're tremendously buying things constantly, and the women are buying new purses, they're buying shoes. I mean, and when they say the economy is flat here, I don't know what they're talking about, because I see those shops kind of flourishing and they're doing very, very well. And I just wanted to keep on going like that. And I think that, like I said, the 2% is a blessing for Healdsburg and for the hospitality industry in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Robert, welcome.
Good evening, Robert News. I'm afraid we're hearing a certain amount of conflation of support for tourism with expansion of tourism. I think it's one thing to support the degree of tourism that we've achieved here, which I think has generally been beneficial, with the idea that there should be unlimited and rapid expansion, which is a very different thing. The promotion of Healdsburg tourism has been wildly successful, I think arguably too successful, but certainly successful enough. Tourism in Healdsburg has now reached the stage of being a self-sustaining chain reaction. Healdsburg as a destination has been in every major newspaper, every major magazine. Healdsburg is known throughout the nation and well beyond. I run into people when I leave Healdsburg, other places, and I mention where I'm from, and they know where it is. It's a small town, it's not got a big population, but I rarely find somebody who's never heard of it. All that is needed to maintain this indefinitely is for us to maintain the beauty of our city and to retain its small town charm. And this last is in danger, and more than a few judge that it's already gone, essentially gone. Small town charm depends on staying small, on not growing too fast, on not changing too quickly, staying a place where regular folks can afford to live, stay in a place where people know their neighbors and take care of them. And that charm is lost as too many of the people around us out on the streets in town, too many of our neighbors, are replaced by short-term visitors, fast turnaround investors, and empty vacation homes. The city of Healdsburg should not rush forward with the promotion of further expansion of tourism funded by tax dollars. We've succeeded. We can now take a break on that project and deal with the other things that need to be dealt with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I'm Pam Bell with Pam Bell Events, and I also represent Dragonfly Floral. I'm the project director at Dragonfly Floral. I would like to cast my vote yes for the TOT tax to remain. I feel like I also want to just mention and make aware all the businesses that don't exist exactly around the plaza where the tourists conveniently walk, that exist on a very small margin, that barely survive, and without the tourist dollar promoting Healdsburg, they would close up, and Dragonfly Floral might be one of those. It's a farm. It's in its 27th year of operation. It's a farm. It's expensive to run a farm. They support the community. They support many employees. And I think there's many businesses out here in Healdsburg that also live on a barely survivable margin with which, if you take away the tourist dollar and the tourist awareness, that they would close. And I think that can be somewhat evident in the winter when there's not so many tourists. I think that's probably a peak time when a lot of businesses start wondering if they can survive yet another year. I also think in this day and age, things are moving exponentially fast. You have to remind people that you exist over and over and over. And I think there's lots of competition for the tourist dollar and the tourist awareness. So I don't think we can rest on our laurels and just assume people are going to continue coming here because we are great now. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Donna Del Rey, and I own Relish Culinary Adventures here in town. I'm also on the Healdsburg School Board. We've lived here 20 years and love our community and are appreciating the challenges that our community is going through right now as far as many of the topics that have been brought up this evening around housing and employment and whatnot. I just want to make 2 points about this. One is that I keep reminding myself that the HTID was formed because there was funding for promoting Healdsburg coming from other sources until recently, and then that funding all changed through, things that were out of the control of the chamber and that side of the town. And the HTID was formed specifically to fill that gap, to be able to fund marketing of Healdsburg as a destination. They've done a great job, and here we are 5 years later. And this, again, I'm just surprised that this is even an issue because this was formed for this purpose, and the idea is to continue it for this purpose. As the revenues grow, I definitely think there needs to be, it needs to be revisited how the money gets used. And I was pleased to hear the comments about dedicating some of that money back to other things that are related to the community and supporting the community, which is fantastic. It leads me to think that maybe a 10-year window might be a little long, not because I can't predict the future. We can't really predict the future. Maybe we go back to a 5-year window and reevaluate and see where we are with the funds and how much money there is and what's realistic in terms of the needs of marketing the community or marketing Healdsburg as a tourist destination versus community needs. The second point I want to make is, as a small local Healdsburg business who is definitely dependent on tourism, in addition to locals returning over and over to my business, I don't have the funds to do the kind of marketing that the HTID allows us to do as a city. And it would definitely affect my business directly. And I mean, I can't hire a PR firm. I can't do the kind of advertising, but I definitely benefit from that, as do many, many other small businesses who can't afford to do this type of marketing on their own. So I'm a huge proponent, as you can tell. I do wonder, again, we don't know. I can't predict a year from now. I wish I could. If anyone can tell me how to predict a year or 5 years from now how my business will do, I would love that. But I think this is a really critical thing for generating revenue for our town on so many levels, not just the HTID, but the entire TOT also. How do we keep that money coming in if we're not promoting our town? So I don't think it's assumed. In fact, I know it's not assumed. So thank you very much.
Deb, welcome.
Thank you. Deb Kravitz, Prentice Drive. I wanted to echo one of the thoughts that Donna just made about the duration of the TID let me say, first of all, I'm in favor of it. I don't necessarily think it has to be 10 years. I think if the consensus from the public is that maybe that's a bit long, maybe a 5-year or another window would be appropriate. But I also think it's very important about the timing right now. It seems like now is not the time to stop it when we have already approved hotels that are under construction and that are going to be coming online shortly. I think it would be disastrous to cease this funding when we have these new, currently non-existent, unoccupied hotel rooms that are going to come online. It seems to me silly to not want them to be successful if they're already approved and projects in the pipeline. So I think in the short run, it makes a lot of sense to continue it and maybe revisit a few years down the line and see if you want to continue it in the future. The other thing I wanted to address is the role of the city council in terms of how the marketing is going to be used and how the funds are going to be used that are dedicated to the community development projects. I spent a little time this afternoon looking at what Napa Valley does with their TID, what the city of Sonoma does with their TID, and there were a few very interesting components that they were doing that are not included in the management plan or the resolution for this TID that I think are worthy of consideration, particularly in light of some of the comments Mr. Summer made that indicates that they seem to be open to a closer alignment of the city's goals with what they want to do. So one of the things I thought was very interesting about what the town of Sonoma does is that all of the TID sales and marketing dollars are only to be used to promote travel and tourism, either for midweek travel and tourism or off-season wintertime events to kind of smooth out the tourism influx and not have everyone here on nice weekends in the summer. And I thought that was kind of smart and would benefit a lot of businesses and the community. The other thing that was interesting from the Napa side is that they had a committee, as Mr. Summers suggested might be appropriate for us, where they had input from lodging people, members of the chamber, citizens, and elected officials and or city planners to talk about how these dollars should be used, both in terms of the development, community development funds, and the marketing dollars. And so I think it's something to consider, and that might make the city of Healdsburg embrace this a little bit more, that their concerns are being addressed and that the citizens have input and are being looked after. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Warren, welcome.
Oh, Warren Watkins, Healdsburg. I thought the presentation by Mr. Eiler was quite scary. I hope some of these numbers you're looking at, you're going to consider very closely and not jump into renewing anything here before we have some other information. I know it may be hard to believe, but I can assure you that there are many of us in Healdsburg who are not dependent on real estate sales or earnings. Yes, the same real estate point of view comes before the council often. It's understandable. But how about the chamber step up and offer something other than business as usual? And I did hear them offer the $120,000 or the 20%. I think was their offer. Sure, many in town continue to benefit from our visitors, but I'm seeing more and more daily and overnight tourism visitors population outnumbering the local population. It seems like our population is increasing, but not from locals. We're losing a lot of our local workers, as was said many times. Sure, many in town continue to benefit, but it's time for the chamber, as I said, to share this growing TOT pot. Where are we at? 577,000 now. I thought it was 400 something last time I was in here. Now it's 500. It's going to be up to 800. There's many worthy causes, as you know, that benefit all of us. So let's start spending some of that money there. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Welcome, Jessica.
Hello, everybody. Well, there's so much to say. I guess I'll start by saying that I'm kind of representing the cultural tourism component of our area. performing arts, the galleries. And we have a wonderful town with wonderful restaurants, everything. Why? I don't understand why we don't want people to come here and enjoy them, because if people don't, we won't have any of this. And the Healdsburg Jazz Festival was created for Healdsburg, but it's not, it's supporters. You know, maybe 40% of our attendees come from here. I don't call the people that come tourists. I don't call myself a tourist when I go to San Francisco to hear a concert, but I need people to, you know, to come from the Bay Area. And our budget, even though it's actually large, is very small in the Bay Area. And in this HTID, in the new budget would only be $360,000 for sales and marketing. That's nothing. That's literally nothing. And we need to keep this ongoing forever and build that. And we all need people to come here. It's no doubt. And the parking problem, there was no parking before some sexy company moved in here and took all the parking places. I mean, you know, I'm sorry, I had to do that. But there wasn't a parking problem. If big businesses are going to move into downtown, then they should supply parking for their employees. There wasn't a problem, and the problem now is that the people, the visitors that are coming here to enjoy it, they can't find parking either. So I don't think it's there. I don't even like the word tourism. The visitors that come here and enjoy our area should be able to park here and enjoy it, and we should reach out to them and invite them to come here. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Mark Decker, 900 Ridgeview Drive. I'm here representing myself as a citizen. I sent off emails to each of you. I hope you received that. So I won't go through that document here, so I hope that you have a chance to digest it. But what I will say is that community services that are supported by the TOT, to me, is a generation for our local people. Within the document that appeared on the city webpage in regards to the budgeting, it broke down that the parks, we have 11 parks in the city that is supported through community services. We have 2 fields that are sports fields that are supported. There are 6 facilities that are supported, including the senior center and the community center. And there are 3 open space and regional park facilities that are supported. And it all comes from TOT. A reduction in that number would have severe impacts, as I outlined in my document. So these are the things that I think should be brought forward. And the fact is that the city should be supportive of the continuation of the TOT and this particular 2%, because it does support the growth of our ability to do the other. So I just wanted to bring those 2 things to the council here. And then also is that I want to correct something here that I continue to hear. And it talks about that the chamber should be more directive in the way the money is spent in this particular district. The chamber doesn't have anything to do with the distribution of those funds. That is strictly done by the board that is, managing those funds. The chamber is just an administrator, nothing else. They prepare documents, notes, and they write the checks for that board. So there is no direction of funds from the Chamber of Commerce. I just want to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back, Mel.
Mel Amato again. I'd like to echo a few things that were said this evening. First of all, I fully support the adoption of the resolution of the intention to renew. As you know, I have no financial interest in any of the lodging businesses. I'm not related to real estate development or any of that. I'm just a resident of this city. I enjoy this city, and for the reasons just mentioned by Mark Decker, I do believe we ought to really understand the impact of the TOT funds, HTID aside for a moment, what that has on our parks and recreation and other support activities in our community. To think that we can drop off on our marketing and continue to get the same amount of visitors to our community, I think is something that someone who's never worked in business just doesn't understand. Marketing is a continuing part of business. The moment you drop it, you can expect your sales will drop. The moment you drop promoting visitors, you can expect the number of visitors to drop. It has to be a continuing effort. And it's a very small percentage. Someone said, what's the return on investment? Well, for the recent numbers, the 80% spend for promotion is about $460K. That generated $3,058,000. That's a return of 7 to 1. That's pretty good return in my estimation. The new proposal talks about going 20% for district development projects, which are other projects other than promotion. That is one-third of the amount that's being proposed for sales and marketing. That is a significant percentage of the TOT tax, that 2% HCID tax, and it will grow as time goes on if visitors continue to come and if, as projected, that income continues to grow. So again, I fully adopt the resolution of intention to renew, and I look forward to the future 2 meetings that will be held, assuming that you pass that resolution tonight.
Thank you, Mel. Welcome, Richard.
Good evening, Richard Berg, Fifth Street. Okay. So the language sometimes gets confusing. It suggests that the members of the HTID are paying this. Obviously, they're not. It's coming from their revenue stream, and it's not coming out of their pocket. We are a place that is very attractive, but we are just one place among many. And I think what Mel just said about needing to continue to market is kind of obvious when you think about all the other places that people might go. To not support the renewal of the HTID is a little bit, it struck me, like the rigidity of the growth management ordinance, with left no flexibility for the city to modify the housing situation under a very limited regulation. Not having the HTID would actually make it difficult to come back if we didn't continue to promote Healdsburg. I think many of the comments that you've heard this evening suggest the incredible complexity and interdependence of tourism and the success of residents and small businesses, our recreation department. I mean, it is all linked. The advantage of having $120,000 in a growing fund to do development, which, while the regulations suggest it has to be to the benefit of tourists, I don't think a fully functional bathroom near the plaza that could pay for over time would benefit only tourists, or benches, or transportation, or any of the other things they've suggested to use those funds for. So I'm in favor of this, and I hope you recognize. Oh, the one thing that I think is important is the 20% should probably not be fixed. As the fund grows or doubles, maybe that percentage could grow and double too, because it would be, in fact, a tip of the hat to the people that think we shouldn't continue to advertise Healdsburg. Perhaps we can not grow our advertising budget at the same rate the funds grow and contribute more to the community development portion of the income. And that would require some modification of the way I understand the management agreement is written. You only have the ability to change a value there by 15%, which I don't know whether that was regulatory or just written into the agreement. But recognizing that as that grows, you might not want to grow the marketing budget as aggressively, especially if everyone's successful. So flexibility there in terms of way that's distributed seems really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Will, welcome.
Thank you. Will Seppi, 417 Healdsburg Avenue. A few prepared remarks. Recently, in a letter to the editor in the local Tribune, with the header, "Price of Success Unacceptable," the writer penned, "I think it would be refreshing for locals and merchants alike to focus together on a more balanced Healdsburg." While I'm not sure what the writer intended by this comment, I would like to shed light on one aspect of it. Merchants are locals. These are not two distinct partisan groups. In fact, I'd argue not only do many of our merchants live in town, but they have raised or are raising families, sending children to any one of our many educational institutions. They're active in our civic organizations, giving freely of their time, talents, and treasures to support the community in which they live and work. As a town, we're most fortunate to have many owner-occupied businesses, from restaurants to art galleries, boutiques, wineries, shoe repairs, barbers, floral shops, bakeries, of course, grocery stores, clothing shops, hardware stores, car dealerships, and more. Very few to none of our merchants are held by larger corporations, save the Rite Aid, CVS, Safeway, Starbucks, Dollar Trees of the world. Yet these organizations do play a critical role in our local economy. I personally am proud to work for the largest employer in the United States, small business. Small businesses contribute substantially to a healthy community. The reality is that businesses of all sizes are faced with rising costs, wages, benefits, raw materials, rents, burdensome regulations, payrolls, insurance, the list goes on. These are real dollars that must be paid as they come due. Our community's choice to significantly limit residential housing, thereby stagnating our population that could otherwise support business, leaves business to find other sources of revenue. In this particular case, tourism. We're blessed to live in what has become a gem of a town, the envy of many, with beautiful parks, great programs for our youth and seniors, and city services that are second to none. But it wasn't always that way. Less than 2 score ago, when walking from school to my parents' business, I'd not passed through the plaza. It was boarded up shops, overgrown foliage, and biker bars. Wasn't much of a place for a kid to go. Although occasionally I'd take a diversion in the salami tree to get a 3-cent piece of double bubble before stopping by the old Redwood bookstore to visit with my great aunt. Much has been accomplished in a few decades. I'm proud to live here, be raising my family, and operating our family business. Tourism plays a critical role in the success of our enterprise. 41% of our employees live in Healdsburg. We employ over 100 people, many of whom have children that are enrolled in our school system, including myself. It's the same 41% that shop, eat, and pay rents here locally. It's the entire crew and their dependents that are reliant on our loyal locals, as well as our visiting guests, to help them make their ends meet.
Will, I got to ask you to wrap it up.
In my role, I'm merely a conduit of money. It's our guests who cover the cost of doing business. The reality, which seems to many not comprehend, is that our business would not be here today if the nearly 50 locals and their dependents and livelihood, if it weren't for our locals and our visitors. Nor would our businesses be able to support the over 100 not-for-profit organizations, civic organizations, and community events if it weren't for both our loyal locals and our visiting guests.
Thanks, Will.
As such, I believe that the HTID should continue in full effect.
Thank you. Ariel, welcome.
Thanks. I like the little added light show for intensive point. I'll try to be brief. Ariel Kelly, Healdsburg resident. One of the things that I think, so I ask that you renew the HTID tonight, and I support moving forward with that with several caveats. One of the things that I think hasn't been mentioned but has been made reference to is that if we don't continue to market Healdsburg, would it be a self-sustaining machine. And I think, as we know, other areas in our community and outside of the North Bay really are seeking to grow tourism dollars, and Mendocino County and other areas, we certainly will be up against other areas that are investing a lot in marketing dollars. And recently, the county actually decided to take away about $1 million of their $3 million budget that had been previously allocated towards tourism and putting it towards services for the county. And so I do think that we would, if we don't renew the HTID, we would see a drop and decline in tourism, just basically because others will be investing marketing dollars and we wouldn't, and tourists are going to go where, the hot new places. And I think that there's a huge flaw in the duration of the HTID renewal. I think that a 10-year extension seems very intense, especially because of where we were 10 years ago, where we were 5 years ago, and where we are today. And just knowing the sentiment that we're hearing from residents, people feeling like there's this, competition for space or public space or opportunities to enjoy our community, that the residents are really feeling like tourism is pushing them in ways they don't like it. And I think we don't know where we're going to be in 5 years. So to say we're going to extend this for 10 feels really not necessary. I think that doing another 5-year duration would make a lot more sense. I think the percentage breakdown of 20% to district development projects, I like that the HTID is including district development as part of this proposed HTID, but I feel like 20%, $120,000 doesn't seem like a lot of money when you really look at how much a shuttle would actually cost. I think that we're seeing residents demanding relief now, and putting funding towards a future fund that might fund a future transit shuttle is really, it would just demonstrate that this is, landing on deaf ears. People want money going into district development projects that will improve the quality of life for residents today and ease some of the burden that tourists put on locals. And so, yes, I think that putting money towards culture and arts make a lot of sense. I liked what Mr. Berg suggested, that there could potentially be a back-weighted increase in years 4 or 5, where that 20% could potentially grow as we see that pot of funding grow. And one of the challenges that was raised, and I'll be brief and wrap it up, around workforce and the labor shortage, I think that nothing in this proposed HTID talks about the labor shortage and housing. And I know we're funding housing as a separate part of funding, but if you look at the percentages,
you wrap it up, please?
Yes, if you look at the percentages of workforce that are housed in Healdsburg for the last decade, and then 5 years ago and today, there is a really strong, drastic decline that you see in that data. And I'm worried about what that looks like in 5 years if we're thinking about the housing and labor shortages, and that is not really being addressed in this HTID. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ozzy.
Hi, my name is Ozzy. I'm the owner of Noble Folk Ice Cream and Pie and Mustache Baked Goods in Healdsburg. I've been coming to Healdsburg since I was 9 years old, and my partner Christian Solberg was born and raised here in Healdsburg. I'm in favor of the HTID. I'm the type of person that always looks forward, and so for me, what I'm seeing right now in the county is I'm seeing other small cities looking at our success and mimicking essentially kind of what we've been doing, and I see that as competition. As you've heard from a lot of folks, business is down, the roundabout is impacting business, and so we would just be shooting ourselves in the foot to, not being able to have a dialogue of the HTID. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim, welcome.
Good evening. Welcome, Council. Just a couple of quick remarks. Obviously, a very emotional subject, complex as everything that seems to come before the council in the last 3 years seems to be these days. There are no easy things. I guess one thought I would say is it seems like there is a lot of the discussion is to try and make this decision and discussion a referendum on tourism, and I don't think that's what this is. This is an investment in the future of the community and the community's economy for the long term. I love the recasting of tourist to visitor. And I think what we're doing is, as pointed out by Dr. Eiler's notes, harnessing an economic engine that really is just part of the community's gift. I mean, it's something that has happened and somewhat been guided, and we should take advantage of that. The conversation tonight has been great because it's talking about the mechanics of how to use that more effectively. And I would hope that we would continue that. And I just close by saying, I think visitors, not tourists, visitors over the long term, this is a long-term investment, they become part of the community. They move here, they raise families, they start businesses. A lot of the great new businesses have come from people that have moved here and started that. They're bringing children into the town, they're populating the parks, they're what making this place authentic and real. So it's not an us and them, it's really about an evolutionary move and how we manage that effectively. And I think that's what the discussion is. But to vote in favor of this, which I am, I think will allow us to continue to have the means to have an intelligent conversation and shape the future of this economy in a way that would really continue to make this an authentic, vibrant, and vital town, not just kind of a static place that stays the way it is right now.
Thank you. Tim, welcome back.
Marketing is essential to any business. I'm in favor of this tax. A smart executive would not want to be painted into a 10-year or a 5-year corner. You'd want flexibility to manage up or down accordingly. Maybe a 2-year review would give you that kind of latitude and the future council the necessary flexibility to manage the business up and down as the economy dictates.
Thank you. Anybody else before I close the public hearing? Holly, welcome.
Hi, I'm Holly Hoods, Grant Avenue, Healdsburg. I'm also the executive director of the Healdsburg Museum, and I'm in favor of renewing the HTID. I guess we're talking about going forward and we're looking at the future. I'd like to invite people to take a step back and look at the past. Right now, our current exhibit at the Healdsburg Museum is called Destination Healdsburg. And I actually created this exhibit specifically with locals in mind because tourism is such a big, important thing to us right now. And it's actually been an important engine in Healdsburg for so many years. It actually goes back to the 1840s, before there even was a Healdsburg. So the point of the exhibition isn't to take a stand about whether tourism is good or bad. It's mostly trying to look at the fact that there have been so many reasons over time that people have come here. I think we're all very lucky to be here now. And when people talk about not liking tourists or feeling like tourists are ruining the town, I think about every time any one of us goes on vacation, we're a tourist. We're potentially ruining somebody else's town. And when people talk about the small town charm of Healdsburg, to me, part of that small town charm is being a welcoming community. So the museum actually is free to the public, so we don't get tourist dollars, but we want tourists to come to our museum. We want visitors to come to our museum. Most of all, we want you locals to come to our museum. So because this exhibition has been so popular, we've extended it. It was going to close October 1st, but we're going to keep it on display until November 5th. And I hope so many people in town who say, I've never gone to that museum, will recognize that we are here for you locals, and we really would like you to take the time to look at the past and look at how Healdsburg's gotten to where it is now. And hopefully you will have a chance to come see Destination Healdsburg before the next public meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Christian, welcome.
Thank you. I'm getting over a flu, so I apologize. I just wanted to thank everyone on the board and everyone that works for the city. You guys have some really tough jobs. But I wanted to say I was born here in 1988 at Healdsburg Memorial, and I did the traditional thing when I was 18, and I said, F this town, I want to go move to LA and do the big thing. And so when I did that, I kind of discovered how special Healdsburg was to me, as you know, a resident here and growing up here, and how we take it for granted sometimes being locals. You know, a lot of things I've been reading online about the way that, you know, locals and business, you know, local businesses and just the locals, it's kind of tourism versus the locals here. And we need to get out of that mentality completely. I think, you know, as much as I would love my business to be 100% locally funded, it's just not, you know, reality. A lot of things play into it. I think our housing is a huge issue in Healdsburg. I think we need, you know, obviously it's a huge hot button topic, but we need more affordable housing. We're seeing the last couple of years we've been noticing it's been so challenging hiring, you know, people within town. You know, we're, you know, competing with other local businesses just trying to get, you know, staff members, and a lot of this, what we're talking about today is going to play into it. And I hope that everyone, I don't know, is taking it to heart. I think the tourism is obviously a huge chunk of our business, but I want to grow our town in a very smart way. I don't think it should be the mentality of I got mine. I was a winery owner in 1980 and I'm set, and everyone else coming into town shouldn't have the same opportunities. You know, if that same sentiment was true, I couldn't come into Healdsburg in 2011 to open Mustache, and I couldn't open, you know, Noble Folk with my partner. And so just the opportunity that the Healdsburg and Sonoma County awarded us, I want to make sure that there are other younger generations that are able to come in and live in this town and be able to have the same opportunities that me and Ozzy did. I really am a proponent of keeping this going, but I do think the 10-year is way too long. I think 5 years sounds a little bit more reasonable, and I agree with some of the comments about the public money and how we're going to spend it. I get concerned with you know, the topic about shuttling people in as a parking saving. I can't imagine anyone that works for me that will be able to jump on a bus and get shuttled into town every day. It just sounds a little unrealistic. So I think we need to think about smart growth in Healdsburg of what's going to benefit locals and tourism. So thank you.
Thank you. Karen, welcome.
Karen Colston. I own a bed and breakfast. I've been here 11 years, and it's just me and John. That's it. We have 4 employees. Of our 4 employees, 3 of them live in Healdsburg. And so we support their families and the children that they're raising. And one lady moved to Windsor because she was able to buy a place to stay. The HID, though, is a marketing. It's marketing. That's what it is. It's marketing. It's not all these other things. I mean, it all ties back together. But the HID district is so we can market ourselves. Marketing and public relations is thousands and thousands of dollars. There is no way that me, as a small business owner, would be able to pay that, afford that. And the HID has paid already $60,000 this year just on the renewal. And that's why we're going for the 10-year, because it's costing us so much marketing money just to go for the renewal. And we need to continue to be able to market ourselves to stay in business. And a vote yes for the renewal of the HID is a vote yes to keep the businesses that it supports, the ones that are in business right now. It supports the ones that are open today. I mean, there are more that are coming online, but the money that we're spending today is supporting the businesses that are open today, and not the ones that might come or that might be built or any of that. We need to support the businesses that are open right now. And that's why I think you should vote yes to support the renewal of the HTID. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome, Maureen.
Maureen Mosley, Healdsburg. I know that the effects of tourism on Healdsburg have impacted a lot of people's lives, and not always in a good way. Those people who are making a lot of money, it's good. For the rest of us, it's not. And I think we've asked for a tourism study, a sustainability study, a number of times. And I don't think that this particular thing can be renewed until we've had that study and we really know what's really going on and how it's really affecting our town. And I think just the fact that we have almost a whole new city council tells us that people are not happy the way things were going. So that's all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Going once? Okay, closing the public comment, and we'll bring it back for questions and discussion. Now, I just want to kind of start it off here. So tonight we're talking about whether to open it up to the public hearing, where details about the plan can be talked about. I think we probably all have a lot of ideas about how to spend the money and little projects that would help this or that. We could probably go on until tomorrow about talking about those things. But I just want to, there were a number of things that were brought up tonight. And I just wanted to ask the council and, the time frame, the 5 versus 10 years. I think that was a common theme. Oversight, I think, was a theme from hearing from the public. And oversight is kind of a broad thing that whether. And I know that if you read into the document, you can actually find that there's a fair amount of oversight that the council has over this, and has actually had going in 5 years into the past that I never really knew about because I never really researched it. But you learn something new every day, right? So with those kind of thoughts, I just wanted to kind of do a little roundtable and kind of hear what everybody has to say about those kind of things in the broad sense of, do we want to go through with the public hearing and then get into more of the gory details about things, or set it up and then Brian is out there with his board listening to what we have to say and getting a clear direction from us 5 about how to shape this so that it's something that we accept and that we want to go forward with, and that we might be able to shape going forward as well, kind of on the fly, which it turns out that's part of the deal here, is that you can change 15% of the total budget per year. So I just wanted to kind of point with the current management plan that's outlined. So I just wanted to kind of get everybody's thoughts and on kind of the big picture. Is that who'd like to?
Quick question.
Yes.
So as far as the 15%, so if I understand correctly, then the 20% 1 year could be 35 the next year.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yes, go ahead.
So I'm totally wanting to honor your process and how you want to set this up, but I do want you to know that having Robert Eiler here with a study that is rich, and I definitely read it in advance, but I've been yearning, and the city council has been asking for a study, and I really don't want to miss this point. It's not an either or. I really agree with you. It's not about tourism versus livability. It's really about livability for all of us to live together, and I just really don't understand why we don't have an ability right now to, as a council, get more information from such a wealth of information. I have so many questions for you. I don't know where to start, and I'm not going to waste time now. I just want you to know I have a ton of questions for you. You've certainly been paid for this job. I'm positive of that. And hearing the $60,000 that has been spent for PR to get us to think about the questions that you want us to think about, okay, whatever you've spent, I just want to learn. See, I'm in a place where I need to understand before I vote. I don't want to just go by one open forum. That's why you call for a public hearing sequencing, which I don't even know why we have 2 in the same month. I think we should have one in October and one in November. But I'm open to just confining it to, do you want to do this? But I think it's more important for us to follow what we said in our city council goals, which was to get a feasibility study, to look at tourism. And that's when I called you, Dr. Eiler, in May. And I've been talking to city manager about this. I need a study that is not just about numbers, but it's about the livability factor. That's what I hear from citizens. It's not a good crowd for that tonight, but I'm telling you that citizens want livability study. They want to know what's happening for themselves. And when we invite our guests in, they do want to stay. I agree, Jim Hyde, they do want to stay, and they buy property, and it impacts housing. It impacts housing because they come for a $400 meal, and they're looking in the window, and they see a house, and they want to buy it, and that affects the economics of people being able to stay in this town. And that's just a tiny little slice of cheesecake there. That's not going all the way. I mean, there's lots of reasons why we want to study this more. So I have a hard time with the process, Mayor, because of course I want a public hearing. Of course I want people to come. And I want everyone to be heard. But I just don't know if leaving this with it's either this or this is really the answer any more than saying it's either for tourism or against tourism. It's not that. It's a process. And I have a concern with the process. I don't really like the fact that tonight, after getting public hearing from business people that were given a particular, and there were people that were no, and I don't even go on social media. It's so divisive. It is so incredibly disheartening. I don't know why you even waste time listening to the people that are going back and forth on all these things around this and that. Come here, be part of a conversation. That's what we need, is a community conversation on this. We need our newly hired communications director to create an opportunity for the citizens to come together with business and say, hey, this is what's going on. If this is where we're headed to improve transparency and communication, why are we limiting to just you either vote HDID or not? It's a bigger issue. It has to do with livability. So I'm open to extending this. And yes, I want to have more public hearings, but I don't want them smushed together in November in the 2 meetings we have. I'd like to support having this next public hearing sequencing October and November, because I think it gives more people an opportunity to be part of something. I don't really feel comfortable tonight renewing the HDID without understanding more aspects of it. I get it. Business owners were invited by Carla Howell in a wonderful letter, and everybody wrote me, and I got lots of things, and I appreciate where you're coming from. I want you all to succeed. My concern is that I don't understand all of it before I say, yes, for sure, 10 years. 10 years is a long time, okay? 5 years is a long time. I don't know about my timing, but I definitely want more public input. I want a real livability study, not a tourism study, a livability study. And I would like to have the meetings to be October and November, not smushed into 2 in a row, because I think that takes away from our community's ability to have conversation about it. So process step 1, I want more time spent to understand the problem. And I don't feel like my questions can be answered tonight. Like, I want to know if real estate values go up more in a town that has high-end tourism. And if that's part of the problem, is that we're advertising for a certain thing, and maybe it's impacting our workers. And like you said, maybe our location is going to keep us in this unique spot. But what do we get out of that unique spot? Who's left? Who's left to be in this unique spot? Can we all stay if we don't have something already, or we already have the money to come in? And it's a crazy time, and I think the money isn't the only way to look at it. So, Mayor, I think you asked me to answer the question of, can I support a public hearing sequencing? Yes, I would like to continue on. I definitely do not want it to expire, but I want a study before I have to vote in December as a council person. I don't feel satisfied with Dr. Eiler coming in and being paid for. I think the city commissioned it, but we didn't pay for it. I would like a different kind of study that will help us look at a bigger picture than just the economics of tourism. And that's kind of what I feel like you did, is you gave us a piece of tourism, which I think is a good piece, but it's not us. It's more than that. And I want all the businesses to grow, not just the ones that are related to certain things that perhaps are seen as tourist. So, yeah, that's my answer. Is that answering your question?
Yeah. Just one more thing was, like, would you prefer 5 years or 10 years?
You know what?
Hypothetically.
I can't even do it. I don't even know if tomorrow. I mean, I want information. I want to know more about it. That's what we committed to as a council in March. We committed to a study that wasn't this study. In fact, I didn't even know this study existed until 2 weeks ago. And then I went, wow, okay, HDID's taking care of it. This isn't the city's study as much as it's the study that was, I think, commissioned by the HDID board and our city manager told me about it today, and I was curious about it because I don't think it meets what I need to understand more about livability. So that's all I'm saying. There's nothing against anyone here. I love y'all. You probably don't feel it, but I do go to your businesses. I do care, but it's not about the us and them. It's about understanding the big picture. So yes, let's continue it. Don't ask me 5 or 10. I couldn't tell you. Okay. I need more information.
Excellent. Thank
Thanks.
you. Councilmember Higley.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. On the report, I think the report that you did was very good. And I do agree that we've put out RFPs, and, like I mentioned before, the big concern I always have is if people aren't agreeing on the data, then how can you have an intelligent conversation? And so maybe, I don't know if this is possible, but I'd like to suggest is maybe there's a way we can get that. I was able to forward the report to a couple people that had emailed me with concerns about renewing and say, hey, here's the report and the management plan, and well, thank you, I appreciate getting it. But if there's a way, maybe we can post it on the city website that people can then comment on, and maybe we can expand on that with the people that have concerns about, oh, this was left out or that was left out. Get some of those comments, and maybe that we come back with an addendum or an update to that report, which may save us a ton of money compared to a full tourism study. Maybe we can expand on this and use this as kind of a base. So that was one thought.
We're talking about the HTID.
Yeah, but she brought it up. I just wanted to address it. So as far as the HTID, I do support renewing it, and what I really support, though, is continuing the discussion, because that's really what we're kind of tasked with tonight, is are we going to continue this discussion? I think this public comment is great. Again, I have a lot of thoughts. We heard a lot of comments, but I think it's important to have that discussion where we can get down into some of these things, like the 20%. Is there a way that maybe there's a preferred return, so as that increases, the dollars increase, maybe that adjusts? The question about the 15%, get clarification on that. As far as the 10-year, I support a 10-year. However, I would like, if the consensus is, well, 10 years too long for it just to be locked in, maybe it's something that's a 10-year term, but there's kind of a revisit. So we don't have to discuss, are we going to renew this thing? But there's a little bit more discussion on maybe some nudging and being able to, course correct if needed. And I think that flexibility is important. But having the discussion that I feel there's a certain part that puts neighbors against each other on some of these topics. And I would like to avoid that and try to get to how we can work together. And that's where I think, agreeing to, adopt this resolution to start the discussion, have the public hearing, to get those comments in and get it baked into this agreement. I think that's the right step. And I think that's what we're up here elected to make those decisions. So 10-year, yes, but I want some flexibility, whether it's every 3, 5, whatever.
Councilmember Gold, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I've been hearing a lot from the public on this topic, both tonight and before tonight, and it seems like one point of view could be summarized as, hooray, we did some great marketing, now everyone knows about Healdsburg, the ball's going to keep rolling on social media, and we don't have to keep investing in it. That seems to be one point of view. And the other point of view is yes, we're very successful, and a lot of other communities would envy that success, and they want to, take some of that business, and that we need to continue to invest in marketing in order just to maintain stasis and maintain our success. So I see the validity of both those points of view. Tonight, I would be certainly willing to vote to extend the district. I'm very interested in tweaking it. I would like to see a larger percentage going to the community development projects. I really like the idea of having more oversight and more involvement of the council, and having some flexibility about how the dollars are moved around. I'd like to look at maybe lowering the administrative costs involved in the fund, so that there would be more funds left over for these worthwhile projects. I absolutely can't get behind 10 years. I think that's just an unrealistic window, considering how changeable this industry can be and how difficult it is to make accurate projections. So I would be willing to vote tonight if there was consensus for a 5-year to consider that. If we can't reach consensus tonight, then I'd just suggest maybe that Section 9 could be struck from the resolution so that we could proceed without committing ourselves to 10 years.
Point of procedure here. When we, if we were to offer a resolution tonight, do we have, I don't know, the authority to kind of do that kind of thing, or is this something where we're giving guidance to going forward for the general concept of renewing the HTID and not the details?
I think I need clarification of the question.
Oh, I mean, you know, if our vote tonight is to whether or not to proceed with the public hearing.
That's right.
I think that it's clear that, well, first, I mean, I want to have to Joe talk, but I just want to see that the Councilmember Gold's question was about, are we voting on what we have in front of us right now, or is that subject to change?
I see what you're saying. You're asking if the management plan can be changed after tonight.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Tonight you were voting on whether to go forward with a public hearing, and you can change the management plan.
That's not the management plan. It's item 9 in the resolution. It says that we are agreeing on a 10-year term.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about the management plan.
Okay, I was confused.
If you wanted to agree to a 5-year term or another term, you would not want that item in the resolution.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Councilmember Nyokas.
Well, yeah, actually, that answered one of my questions as well, so thank you. But I guess my other question is, what flexibility do we have as far as beyond that for tonight? I mean, can we, Bridget, to your concern, can we talk? I know we're talking about setting a date for a public meeting and a public hearing, but what's the definition of public meeting, public hearing? And you know, I know that we also have in our near future a discussion about a working session about hotel COPs, which kind of intersects here. So I'm wondering if maybe we could have a working session that can. I mean, I think we're getting kind of into too many topics, perhaps. But in the spirit of let's have a bigger conversation, I wonder, can we have a more of an interactive working session to have these discussions? What else could we?
Are you talking about a working session specifically about talking about the HTID and its details? Or is your support for the continuation of the HTID to have some sort of broader discussion on tourism in general?
Let me ask you this. As far as, and this is a question for staff, probably for City Attorney.
Sorry, we're trying to figure out a noticing provision here.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. But so we can, the specific question I have is around renewal policies and when we go forward with this, like what we talked about 5-year versus 10-year, or I'm also wondering about, Councilmember Hagley mentioned revisiting some of these topics. I mean, I think I'd like to have more clarity first on what are the renewal policies that we have in front of us as far as what if we say 5 years, is that it? We can't ever. My understanding is the HTID in the current form can't be renewed, but we could create another HTID perhaps. Or you know, let's say 5 years expires and we come up with a different 2% TOT that has, maybe it's not HTID, but maybe it's going, you know, has like a Measure S, but with different objectives. So I'd like some clarity.
I think we're talking. We have a pretty specific thing that we're talking about here. That the lodging establishments in the town are putting this forward to us, and that's kind of what we're looking at tonight. I think in the future, I mean, that's another thought of another thing, but I guess what would be nice to get direction from the council tonight is, it sounds like we have a couple of options that we could potentially strike line item 9 and not have a term, or we could vote amongst ourselves to say we make that a 5-year term, or we accept it as a 10-year term as it's written. So
Mayor, I'm really uncomfortable with how we've jumped to 5 years or 10 years. There are people even in the business community that said do 2 years. So I guess my concern is that we're getting in these false dichotomies again that don't serve the public good. So no one's against anything anywhere, I don't think. I think what I need is to know why we've gotten to this. The easiest part is to go 5 or 10. Okay, yay, yay. That's so typical of our culture. We need to stop that kind of false alternative. It's not even about that. It's about us understanding more what we're getting into. And this is a public hearing, sort of, tonight, right? We've got the petitions. We're totally listening. Good arguments have been made. The business community is coming to us and saying, we need you to really support us. We need this now. We can't wait. We can't have this expire. So we're there. We're responding. But we also have a responsibility to the public to have process. And so I'm really having a hard time jumping into. So I think we definitely need to knock out 9, because I'm not going to be able to provide a yes vote if you go to a 5-10. Because to me, it's not necessary to even go into the time limit now. I know we want to extend it. No matter what, it sounds like we've got consensus that we all want to extend HTID. It's just a matter of the numbers, right? So couldn't we just do what the resolution says? We want to renew it and establish the time and place for a public meeting. I've already suggested not to crunch them into November, both days, so that we actually offer opportunities for our public to come that aren't in the business community, potentially, that might have something to say about the livability issue that I think is under this. And that's what our council goal says. That's what we agreed to in March, to seek balance, commercial tourism growth with quality of life and more closely align with our community values. That's on the poster over there underneath economic development. It also says prepare an economic asset inventory study that assesses the city's economy, including the tourism sector. Is this what we got tonight? Maybe we can check it off and say, Robert Eiler's given it to us. I don't personally think everything I need answered has been given to me. I think there's a bigger piece in the study. So I'm having a hard time. Why don't we just simplify it and say, absolutely, we're going to renew it. We're going to go ahead and go for it, and we want more input, and that's why we're going to establish the time and place.
So, Mr. Mayor,
keep it simple instead of start asking me about 5 and 10, because that's going to create some issues for me.
Yes.
Can I finish what?
Go ahead.
Kind of the direction I was going. So I think what we're being asked to do is to vote on a resolution. We have a draft resolution in front of us, and we've already agreed to strike number. It sounds like we've agreed to strike number 9. But maybe I think what we need to do is, for the purpose of tonight, focus on what other things that we strike from this resolution, and then so that we can then have a further discussion on how we can use the next public meeting forum as a way to help clarify. Because I've got way more questions that I need to, and comments and suggestions and ideas that I think your point is that's not our job tonight.
Right. And I think the point that I was trying to make when we started our discussion was that, we were elected to figure out this stuff, right? And we're in the position that we can study this and know more information than, folks in general. And tonight we're tasked with whether or not to go forward with a public hearing on this subject. We have a draft resolution in front of us. I'm hearing that from one council member that 10 years is definitely not an option. I'm hearing from another one that 10 years is okay. I'm hearing from another council member that I don't want to talk about time frame, and that's where I am. So right now I don't have any direction on that, and I would really like to provide a clear direction to the staff and to the HTID board to go forward with the next round of the proposal that they come back to us. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
So that's what I'm trying to do. So I wanted to just ask the city attorney if striking number 9 would be okay.
Yes, that would be fine. There's a statute that actually speaks to what information needs to be in this resolution. And a few things are called out. The time and the place of the public hearing is called out. So that's why, Vice Mayor Menzel, we've got this and that in the resolution. But the duration of the HTID is not required to be in the resolution. So we could easily
How convenient.
strike that. I know I should have waited like an hour ago.
Gee, thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, let us roast up here.
So may I also add if number 2 can be changed? So that we get dates that would be more reflective of a sequencing of timeframes? Or do you have a problem with that? Changing to October 16th instead of the November, whatever.
Bridget, you have to clarify to me how that's going to make it easier for people to participate. Are you thinking people are gone for the month of November?
No, I'm thinking, well, maybe, but I'm also thinking, yes, the first week, that's the Monday of Thanksgiving week. I mean, I'm throwing it out. I think if you want people to come and give input, look at the business people that are sitting through this right now. You've got to give them a sequencing. You can't just have 2 meetings in a row or that. I personally think do one in October, one in November. I really think that would be a better plan than getting them all in November.
But we do have a sequencing of 2 in November, and that gives us more time to get a little bit more of the information that we're looking for. I mean, really what we're looking for is to have a public discussion. And I mean, we've had some of that here, but you know, we're going to be discussing the management plan, going down into the weeds, so to speak. And so I think for tonight, all we're doing is moving this forward to say, yeah, let's have a public hearing on this.
I kind of like the sequencing being that close together, just because it keeps the topic alive, fresh in people's minds, and offers some resolution on the topic as soon as possible.
I may be able to shortcut this again after the fact. One of the statutes that the city clerk and I were just tracking down, it has a 45-day notice requirement. So that explains the sequencing.
Can I ask a question about the timing? So 5 years versus 10 years, is there flexibility? Can we do 7.5 years, 6 years? I mean, that in the discussion, is there a limit on how long these improvement districts have to be set for? Is there a limit, or are we negotiating a lease where we can do month to month or 20 years?
Month to month.
10-year max.
But within that, you do have discretion.
Okay.
So it sounds like
Councilmember Neokis, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So again, going back to the actual draft resolution. So it looks like we've got number 11 and 12, which specify the times. We're okay with those, the dates, because of the noticing requirements and such. We're good with those. We've already said we want to strike 9.
I think I've heard from at least 2 council members. You're okay with striking 9?
I'm okay with striking
okay.
9. Item 3.
Okay.
So my question with item 3 is, okay, the contents of the draft management plan satisfies all requirements of the Streets and Highways Code. I guess that'd be okay. I think I'm hesitant to say that we are accepting the draft management plan.
I've asked the city attorney about, is the draft management plan still flexible after this time? And I heard that the answer was yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we don't have to strike 3. We're okay with letting changes come to the plan, so that we don't have to strike 3.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Great. Item 8. The assessments levied for the HTID shall be applied towards sales, promotion, and marketing programs to market Healdsburg lodging businesses as tourist lodging, meeting, and event destinations.
That needs to stay in.
That needs to stay in. Okay. And so are we okay with that? Because that is starting to talk about some of the specifics, but the way it's written, I'm actually okay with that because it does.
Yeah.
Okay. And then item 9 is also, we've decided,
that's gone.
That's on. So with that, so it sounds like the only thing we're striking is item 9 after all that.
Right.
So I'd like to offer a resolution of the City Council of City of Healdsburg declaring its intention to renew the Healdsburg Tourism Improvement District and fixing the time and place of a public meeting and public hearing thereon and giving notice thereof, with item number 9 stricken.
Second that.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? May I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Gold?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilor Magliukas?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Menzel? Mayor McCaffrey?
Yes. Thank you. We're going to take a 5-minute recess.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll bring the meeting back to order. We are on item 9A. City Manager McKinley, take it away.
Mayor McCaffrey, council members. So this is an item which was brought up at a previous council meeting regarding a video by a local community group that wanted to be shown at a council meeting, and with regards to protocols and when and where those videos would be appropriate. The concern staff had was the video in question may be completely appropriate for the community to view. However, when bringing those to a council meeting and showing those under public comment, the challenge becomes when you allow one in, regardless of how appropriate it may be, you really need to allow any type of video to be shown at a council meeting. And so prior to allowing this or any other video, staff is asking that some protocols be set in place so we have a clear understanding of when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate to bring these types of videos, whatever they may be, to be shown during a public comment session, if you will. That really concludes the staff report. That's germane to the conversation we had with council, or was brought up with council at the last meeting.
Are there any questions from council about this?
So are we, sorry,
go ahead,
Mr. Mayor. So are we discussing video during public comment? That's what we're discussing.
My understanding was we were talking about showing videos during the public comment session. That was what staff understood at the last meeting.
Okay, so I just want to make sure so that we're talking about at the very beginning non-agenda items, and then somebody wants to show a video, or if there's an agendized item and we say, okay, time for public comment, at that point, if somebody wanted to show a video, is that what we're just, no? I see yes and no.
Okay, so just for our minutes from the last meeting, this is all that happened. There was a question about a video being shown, and the minutes reflect, and I know they're skeletal right now, but they are listed there, and I remember it, and I watched it again, that the question was really about whether or not we could use that video as a way to have a work session around the question of what the video's content is. So I have no problem if there's a fear, and I think it is rooted in a liability of, whatever, people come up and start giving us videos. I think there is definitely legitimate concern about especially public comment that is non-agenda item time frame. That would be a really crazy thing, just go, here's my video. But I have no problem. In fact, I would have a hard time in a democracy limiting an ability for a group to bring a video forth that we all saw in advance, or we were interested in having a conversation around it and wanted to have a common viewing of it in public. It's much like when Mill Street asked for each of us to sit, as we did, and watch their video on the district that they're promoting, and we saw their video. It wasn't public. I understand that's a developer, and you're going to say it's a different category, but I think with this technology comes different mediums and ways for people to present information. But I want a work study session around that video. I don't want to just show a video, and I think the people that asked us to show it, they never wanted it to be played, and then, okay, it's over, bye, we can't comment, like public comments. Because public comments are frustrating for people when we don't answer them. They give all these things, and then it's like, bye, then staff answers the question. I think that it's really an interesting medium to be using video, and I think that it would be helpful to have guidelines, but I also like the idea of our public having an opportunity to create something that we could see and have conversation around. But maybe that's the study session culture that I'm looking for in this council, and not a business meeting, which has always been the paradigm I can't understand. I mean, we're spending all this money every day or every meeting, but maybe this council needs to get, maybe we are a young council, and maybe we do need to get more understandings of our public. I really want to be a public meeting session that is about generating ideas and not just 3 minutes, red light, you're gone, bye. It really needs to be like we have a conversation. So that's what I think that group wanted, and that's how I left it. So as long as you understand the intention was never to play it without viewing it first, and then 2 or 3 of us saying we want to watch it together and then have a conversation around this public forum that took place in May of this year.
So the question is about the specific video and watching that particular video, because I was on the impression we're discussing
Before we have any more discussion, I'd like to open it up to the public. Is there anyone here who has any comments or clarifications on this matter? Todd, welcome. There you go.
Councilwoman Mansell, you captured exactly what the intention was, and we understand, the complexities of having groups present material. But this is a powerful way of encapsulating a lot of ideas and information. We had over 100 people. You've got the detailed comments. There's a lot in there to digest. We really think a work session could be incredibly productive for figuring out how do we work through all of these intertwined issues. We've heard tonight about the HTID and the relationships and impacts and so on. And so I think it's just a way of setting the stage for a really good conversation. And I hope that you're not going to limit what could be a really powerful medium. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Decker, welcome.
I read this document that was, talking about protocols and procedures. And it showed that there was a November 4th, 2013 lined out. And then there was an underlined new date that said May 19th, 2014. So it sounds to me like these protocols were developed back in 2014. And I wasn't sure why it was coming up other than just clarification. What was the protocol for anybody in any given circumstances in addressing the city council? So it seems to me that it's already laid out here, and then if you're going to modify that, then you would modify the protocols. But I was confused as to the purpose of the new business item, given the fact is that this was back in 2014. You just reference it when somebody wants to stand up here. That would seem to me it would be the appropriate thing. You've already got it written down. If you're going to modify it, then you're going to redo this document. So I just wanted clarification about, if that's all this was, is to say, hey, we already got this stuff taken care of, then you're good. But if you're going to modify it again, so then you would step forward and do it. But I wasn't sure why this was on new business, because it was brought up in context with a video presentation in some form, but this identifies it more specifically as to what's appropriate when addressing the city council. So that's just what I had to comment on.
Thank you. Tim, welcome.
I think this is an opportunity to continue to step into the future. We've got our beautiful video screens here. We got camera, we're live, we're streaming. Video is now, live video is now. It could become a part of the public session. You could set in the protocols that things have to be submitted in advance for review to make sure they're publicly appropriate. And they got to be limited to 3 minutes. I don't think it's any different from somebody coming up here with a long letter that exceeds the 3 minutes, staging it between 5 other people, and have them read it, read the letter in series. Because what's going to happen is somebody's going to show a video. They're going to have their supporters come up, ask their questions, comment, just like it's a public session. It's just another form of media.
Thank you. Ariel, welcome.
Hello, Ariel Kelly. The city of San Francisco allows video or multimedia presentations to happen during the allotted public comment period. There is an overhead projector and a screen and a computer that people can plug into should they want to show something. And it's a really slippery slope that I don't know if we want to go down. I wonder, in terms of just being able to share more than what your 3 minutes allows at the microphone, why folks can't just send an email with a link to a video or share on social media and mention all of your social media profiles so that you are alerted to watching this, and that's something that a member of the public is interested in having you observe. I don't know what value it would bring to have that happen during public comment if there isn't an opportunity for further dialogue about it. But it seems like it opens the door up to, if there's a side of an issue that wants to use video or a multimedia presentation to share their point of view, it could kind of go down a road of, then we need an opposing campaign to create another video or multimedia presentation. I don't think that's the point of where people are coming from. But I think where the original idea was intended at the last meeting was really more around what's currently happening and the members of the public that want to talk about livability and tourism and what's happening with housing. They're not feeling like they're being heard, and the public comment period is not working for them. And so they want an opportunity to address the council and to have a work session or to have a dialogue that's constructive and moves the conversation forward and isn't just, let's go have a study. Okay, let's have another study. It's really where do we go from here? And I think it's, again, no one's listening to one another. People want to have a conversation and they want to use the video as a starting off point. And the video is great, but I don't think it is any information that maybe you don't already know. It's more of they want to have a conversation and they want a venue to have that conversation. And I think that's maybe what Vice Mayor Mansell is trying to bring to the conversation with all of you, that what's currently happening, it just seems like there's this group of residents who really want to see change happen and really want the council to listen to them, and they're creating these public forums to get change in process. And then there's things happening at the city kind of in a vacuum, and it doesn't seem like anyone's listening to one another or working together. And that's where I feel like we got to come together and have some progress, or else we're just going to keep funding studies and have the same conversation next year. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public comment on this. I have a few comments on this. So I was actually specifically asked to show a video at a council meeting and then have some of the creators of that video be able to comment on it afterwards. And there wasn't any talk of any discussion there, but it was kind of alluded to later on where, yes, we want to continue this conversation. And, I just have to say that, the meeting that was put together on May 31st by the Sustainable Tourism Group, I was not able to be there because that's my birthday, and I had a party that I wasn't, I couldn't be there, but I got the notes from it, and that group of people did an incredible job at bringing people together, documenting what they had. I mean, it was professionally done. I thought it was fair, and I thought that it was a great event, and they worked really hard at that. And this gets to kind of going back to the HTID discussion where we had this goal that came out in March about doing a tourism study, and frankly, I think that group did it for us. I mean, I think that section of the section about how people feel and the livability and the impact, the pages that I have in my iPad here scanned from that, the video, the post-it notes, all the things that were compiled, I think is that section of, in my mind at least, it is that section of the tourism study. And I think that Rob Eiler's study that was done as part of the HCID is the numbers one. So I bid, $50, I'll put the two together and turn it in. But it turns out that, we got bids back for getting this tourism study done, and, it's six figures, and it's a lot of money. And, I'm not really, at this point, I don't think I'm really someone who would want to continue down that path of spending that money and having that study done when we have a group of folks in town that have done most of the work for us. And I would be happy to go, and I wish we could have another meeting, a follow-up, hopefully, about maybe more specifically about the HDID and more talking about it where, we as a council could show up there and we can have a discussion like we want to have about details and stuff like that. And, I would love to participate in something like that before we talk about the next HTID discussion, where we can freely talk about it. And don't get me wrong, I mean, city attorney, if there's a meeting that's publicly noticed, not by the city but by an organization, and it's in the public and anybody can go to it, that's not a Brown Act violation, is it? If we are all there and we're having a discussion.
You can attend community meetings. Yeah, you can't talk about items that could be city business if there's a quorum of you at the meeting. So it can be a tricky line.
Right.
So another option could be to hold a work session here focused on this item. And I think at those points, I want to be clear, and I think the city staff, or maybe myself, we have to say no a lot. And it's really easy to say yes because it makes your life a heck of a lot easier. But the challenge sometimes is when you have to look at policy and you have to take a look at the unintended consequences of doing certain things in a city, you really have to be very cautious. And I think that's why staff is very cautious about this topic, because as somebody mentioned, the slippery slope. However, when there are agenda items or there are work sessions, we can control that in a much better. It's a much more controlled environment. And so when you have appropriate media, such as videos, whatever they may be, that certain community groups want to show and talk about, and it allows everybody to provide whatever information they want, that becomes a healthier conversation because all parties are represented. So I think from that perspective, having a work session sooner than later, it sounds like, would actually do accomplish a lot of things. We could talk about the tourism studies, which the mayor just brought up, and when I picked my jaw off the floor and I saw the prices, it was like, we need to really talk about this. And then the information that Mr. Eiler presented, the information this group has done in the past, and the interest that the HTID representatives have shown here today, and just the general public, I think it makes some sense at this point if council is interested in doing that work session and really have it be somewhat organized, but really allow for a really free-flowing community dialogue, and then have council attend and it be noticed. And at that point, you can have those conversations. You don't have to worry about the Brown Act under a work session scenario.
I think that's an excellent idea. I'm just not so sure that. I mean, I have to sit down. I don't want to get into the gory details, but I got to sit down with the city attorney and ask about, city business, right? I mean, is that, if we're not voting on a resolution, if we're not crafting a thing, I mean, we could have a free and open discussion in public, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a city-sponsored meeting, although having it be a city-sponsored meeting would be nice because we have the facilities to broadcast it and all that. But I know we've spoken about having a meeting on November 2nd, talking about other issues that have been brought up as like the hotel CUPs and things like that. It would be really nice if we could push that up and make it sooner rather than later on a non-council day, because it sounds like it's something, it's the free-form discussion and the openness is something we really need to have on this issue. Is that?
Listen, I just want to be really clear about free-form discussion. I want to have a discussion, don't get me wrong, but I really think there needs to be facilitation. There has to be time frames and people need to feel safe. But I don't see why local government does not facilitate for a work session where we could get together and actually have a conversation and feel safe in this room called the town hall. I don't know why we have to even go through these delicate, aren't we safe in here to have conversation with time limits? I'm just wondering what free flow conversation means to you. It's what happened tonight. I mean, it's what happened the night of the Modern Gallery thing. There were so many people on one side, but that's what we do in here. We let people freely come up and repeat things that they want to repeat under the guise of public comment. I would like it to be more specific, and I would like to have more of a guided facilitation after it, just because I want to get something achieved that night. But that's just me, because I want to make sure that we learn something and then we reflect on it and we use it. So I'm open to doing a study session, a work session, whatever people feel comfortable with the whole council. And if some people can't come, that's okay, right? Sure. And we're not making a decision that night. We're studying, or whatever words we want to employ, in a place that's supposed to be a place where the town gets together and talks about ideas. And we have conforming time limits with a facilitator. Is that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I mentioned free flowing, work sessions are usually less formal, and so that's why I use that term. But the idea is you have folks come in, just like what happened tonight, whether council wants to be up on the dais. These are all things we can work out, or they want to be at tables like we've done for work sessions in the past. Staff is fine facilitating those things with the intent of making sure the public is heard, obviously. And so, again, I think if that's council's desire, I'd be happy to look at some dates and have work with Maria, and look at some dates after we survey council and kind of go from there.
We have the 45-day rule on this?
No. This is totally separate.
So we could do this in October. We don't have to wait until November when it's already packed.
We just need, I think, 24 hours for a study session.
And we can videotape this and broadcast it live, and everybody can hear what people are saying. Okay.
That is the will of the council. So, Mr. Mayor, I think there are two questions here, right? First is, how do we facilitate this better conversation about the tourism question first, right? So that's that. I'm fully supportive of what we're talking about. It's kind of what I was getting to before, which is, can we have a working session where we have that greater flow of information? We can ask questions, we can get answers, throw ideas out there, get the feedback from the ideas. I'm fully in favor of that kind of format for a working session for tourism. That's question number one. I think question number two is, what about the question? What about are we going to talk about amending our protocols with regard to videos in general? Do we want to talk about that?
Can I weigh in?
Excellent point. Excellent point.
Can I weigh in?
Yeah. Well.
Oh, you're not done. Sorry.
I'm not done. And I love the idea of jumping in the 21st century. I think it's fantastic what we've done so far, and I think there's a lot to be said about other ways. But I think there's plenty more ways to integrate, to interact and present information than just video. And I think if you just start saying, oh, we'll do video, then we're stacking the deck in favor of people who can who have the money or skill sets to do videos. And what about podcasts, or what about PDFs or presentations? There are all kinds of other ways to present information in the 21st century than just video. And I would suggest that we. One of the things when I was back at the league, one of the vendors at the in the hall was Excella, who actually is the software company that does the legislative management tool where we look at the agendas and write our notes and everything. So they were there, and they, the topic of this video thing came up, and so my point is there are ways I think that we can utilize the tools we have better, and I would say that to allow the public to weigh in, add their comments to the agenda. The comments become in the form of a link to a video, in the form of a link to a podcast, in the form of a link to a Google spreadsheet, whatever. OpenGov, there's a way that you can create stories that link to the budget items themselves. What I'd like to see done is to direct staff, specifically our wonderful new engagement coordinator, to look into these various new 21st century tools to give us some suggestions, some feedback on what other steps we can take to incorporate these 21st century interactive technologies into the agenda process. Those are my 2 cents.
And kind of getting back to your question too, is our actual agenda item, which I blown that out of the water. I'm totally off track. But I mean, what's your thought on having videos and public comment? I mean, that's what we're.
I think that's my thought is I'm okay with allowing not the public to actually present the videos, but add links to the videos as part of the
Okay.
agenda review process before the meeting happens, so that we have a chance to look
view
at
them
those
on our
videos
own
on our own
volition.
time, or anybody can look at those videos on their own time. When the subject of the public meeting is we review the items, have some public comment verbally, but let's just get things done.
Okay. Councilmember Gold. Sorry.
Yes, so I think we have to get back to remembering what public comment period is for on off-agenda items. And to my mind, it's to allow an avenue for people to bring things to the attention of the council that, just to let us know about some situation or something they're concerned about, or something they're promoting. But an opportunity just to spread, get some information to the council. I think if we open it up to videos, you're going to start having people who want to get a wider audience for their video on vaccination or contrails or some other issue that isn't necessarily cogent to city business. And it's not going to serve us in getting work done at a council meeting. So I'm not for it. As for this particular group, I think there's just so much discussion about, tourism impacts and hotel development. I think we definitely should have a study session, and I'd like it to be pretty well structured so that we know what our objectives are, because I'm just not interested in just, talking, and then going home. I kind of want to know what we're trying to get out of this meeting, and I know what I personally would like to get out of it. But anyway, that's maybe a topic for another discussion.
Councilmember Hagley.
Yeah, a couple comments on, we're all politicians. We love to talk. And so for me, I agree with Councilmember Gold about the public comment that's for us to hear from the public. I'm not in favor of having people just email videos from wherever. You mentioned the equity and, if somebody has a lot of money to produce a slick video, the example that I have is Steve Jobs literally had to go down and beg to get his project approved down in Palo Alto. And there's a billionaire, and right after that could have been a migrant worker giving a public comment. There's no distinction between class, anything else. That mic is for whoever wants to come and speak. And I think once we, start allowing videos, it's not quite as equal. I think it's important that this is a business meeting. I think, I agree that public comment, you come down, I love hearing the public comment pro and against. I mean, if somebody wants to step at the mic and just say, David Hagley, you're an idiot, they get 3 minutes to say that. And I'm fine with that because that's what we're here for. Now, with regard to the study session, the work session and having videos, the only concern I have is what vetting of the videos is going to take place. Because I attended, we've been talking about specifically this tourism meeting that had 100 and some people. We also had quite a few people here tonight, and so you can't say, oh yeah, that one's better than this one, or it's all public comment. But we have to be careful when something is submitted, when there's references at that meeting about tourist beds versus hotel rooms, and it changes numbers. So I think it's very important that if something's submitted, that we have clear guidelines of, okay, but make sure that we're all working off the same statistics. If there's, I think Robert Eiler said there's 291 rooms coming online. Well, let's make sure, okay, those 291, what do they include? Do they include timeshares? Do they include this, that, and the other thing, to make sure that we're working off the same information so that we don't spend our work session arguing over, well, that's a hotel room and it has 2 beds, so really that's 2 tourist beds kind of thing. That's just my concern. I don't have an issue with video coming into like a work session, a casual session. I think in this formal business type setting, I think we need to stick with the protocols that are in place. I think they work. We saw tonight they work, and hopefully next 2 meetings related to this topic, it'll be packed house again. And I like hearing from people.
The protocols that Mr. Decker came up, and you just said are in place. Here's what it says in the protocol. For public hearings, you get 5 minutes, and that has not been crossed out. This is the language of what we actually have now. And it says here, if you need any materials, if you provide the city a copy of any presentation materials at least 3 business days in advance to provide the city time to prepare the equipment and materials for the meeting. So there's a suggestion that we're not dealing with an oration, but we're actually dealing with something that requires equipment and materials. And this is public comment on agenda items under letter C addressing the city council. So I find that interesting that our own language suggests that you would, in fact, 3 business days in advance, come forth, provide the city time to prepare the equipment and materials. Preparing the equipment today should not be a big problem. Look at these huge screens. We've got computers. So it does suggest they are, in fact, open, or at least in 2014, we're open to having equipment and materials for the meeting. I'm not making a case for it for public comment. I'm just asking you to remember, if you're going to go with, let's go with what's been in protocol. The protocols in this particular language suggest materials can be provided with equipment being prepared for materials for the meeting. So I don't know if that makes sense. You might want to look it over. Maybe we need to look at what this actually says. And
I interpreted that as like PowerPoints and PDFs.
Well, what's the difference between that and a video?
Well, I think that gets to my point too. But I think a point of clarification is that this is on public hearings versus public meetings. So there's some distinction between. So, for instance, the HCID, we're going to do a public meeting on November 6th, public hearing on the 20th. So those are 2 different types of meetings. So I think it's important to clarify what we're talking about here, right? And the language and about all these protocols. That's kind of why I'm going back to look. Let's. And B, I'm fully sensitive to the fact that I don't want to have the meetings interrupted by these lengthy videos. I get that. I'm not proposing that. I want to avoid that too. But I also want to give folks the ability to contribute different types of information in different types of methods, which is via a link that we could review beforehand. So that's I just want to clarify that that's what I'm advocating for. And again, going back to my original point, I think that might be wisest to just without us getting into the weeds, give this to staff, give this to our engagement folks and the city attorney to review and get their feedback on ways that we can expand the ability for the public to weigh in with different ways of presenting information, video, PDFs, in whatever format.
I mean, I get my vaccination and contrail videos through my email today, and that seems to work. I'm able to see them.
I get that, but it's also not a matter of public record. And I think if you actually have the links in the associated with the agenda items, then we can go back and say, oh yeah, there was that video about contrails.
Well, and there was an example with Parks and Rec I saw on Facebook. I think Ariel, you posted something about, hey, we're going to have Parks and Rec meeting. Please come to the meeting because your comments here are not part of the public record. So, I mean, there are ways for people to contact us, but what we're discussing is whether a video is going to be public record or I get sent a link or it's posted to my Facebook page and I can share and the message is still getting out there. I think that's kind of what we're discussing, right?
Let me just remind you that any email you receive is public knowledge. I had that experience. So just, anything you communicate out to citizens and vice versa is public. Look, we need to revisit what the protocols are because there's also sort of about other evidence that you can provide. So it's not just speaking that people have been invited in the past to bring, but I'm not pushing for videos. I'm not pushing for it. I just think this one, and Mayor McCaffrey characterized it most succinctly. Let's get to the point of what really is relevant. We have a citizens group that is interested in being heard. They invited people in a public building they paid rent for so they could create a simulation of some kind of a community event where we gave input. Some of us were there. I don't know if the numbers are wrong. You could argue tonight's numbers, some of them were wrong. What's wrong, what's right? Let's get together. Yeah, let's do it. Let's communicate. Let's find a way for people to feel comfortable and come. Let's create a date for a work session. City manager, if we could do that, that would be a great motion for me to make. I would love to make a motion for a work session on the issue of livability, sustainable tourism, whatever words you want to employ that aren't just about one narrow focus of HTID, because it's not HTID we're talking about, right?
Right. So we're not asking for a formal action. We're just asking for direction on the protocols. It sounds like to me that we'll continue to leave the protocols as they. We'll have to revisit them based on some comments you made. But with regards to videos, those will not be part of the public comment for at least for the foreseeable future, until we revisit protocols. With regards to a public work session regarding tourism, let staff work on that and come back to council, because it's technically not on the agenda, but I can tell it's very important, and I want to make sure that we get this right. So staff will come back, we'll look at some dates, we'll talk to some folks in the community and make sure we do it right.
Yeah, and I think it's important that there's a lot of time between, not a lot of time between now and when the work session happens and when the next public hearing on the HTID takes place. Is that good? Okay. Now we'll move on to adjournment.
I move to adjourn.